Okay, we are live. Welcome everyone to the stream. We got another exciting locals for y'all today. This time the locals are in Android format. I'm just gonna pull up the bracket to see who we got here in the tournament here. If you want to participate in the locals, there is still a little bit of time to sign up, like about a minute. So head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server if you do want to do that. But yeah, I mean, we hold these every week. So even if you don't join this one, we've got some every week for you in a variety of different formats. So be sure to dive into that if you do want to see that. But yeah, this is a pretty decent turnout. We got 10 people so far. I'm going to leave it open for like a minute or so, just to, have it there. Also, I want to shout out Addison McGee, who in chat made a great Yu-Gi-Oh card back, which is really, really cool to see. And also it's kind of like a zero as well. So it's like YGO from zero. So yeah, that's sort of one of the synergies that I didn't notice when I first made the channel, but it is kind of cool that the back of a Yu-Gi-Oh card does look like a zero there. So, kind of a fun little synergy there. But we'll be diving into the games. It's been about a minute. We got Soul typing in chat, but they are in the okay, they're in the thing. So yeah, let's get this thing started then. If you haven't sort of seen Android format before, it's a format that goes up to Tournament Pack 3's cards, but the main card pool addition to it is the cards from Labyrinth of Nightmare. So you get like a ton of, new beaters like Gemini Elf, Kaika the Ghost Destroyer, Bazoo the Soul Eater, and it leads to a very interesting metagame. So I'm going to start, we're starting the locals, not the big retro tournament, but we'll just shuffle up the seeds, just, see what happens. And yeah, there we go. We've got the new challenge link there for everyone ready to go. And we got some fun games ahead, it looks like. So we've got Dueling Book open as well. Let's dive in there. But yeah, the new beaters add a lot of interesting depth to the format. Also, they're played with like they're sort of, it's not really like pre-errata because it's just mistranslated effects. So like Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, but the Soul Eater and Skuller can banish any cards from the graveyard, not just monsters in this format. Because the TCG had a mistranslation there. And while that does make them a lot more powerful, it also makes it a lot more interesting, I think, than they were originally, because you do have these like really interesting interactions. You have the graveyard being a real resource in a way that it hadn't been up to this point in the past. And it's just really, really interesting to see. And it completely changes sort of the framework that the game is played by. So I always like to sort of divide the DM era formats into a couple different like sub eras. And I feel like the first sub era goes from like Yugi Kaiba to Imperial format, which is the format right before this. And Android sort of starts a new era of DM Yu-Gi-Oh, where things are a lot more aggressive and fast paced, but still very, very fun. And it makes a lot of sense why this is a sort of fan favorite format from this time period among people who do play the DM era. Although it definitely does have its major detractors as well. There are some people who don't like this format, but I think it's really fun to play and to watch, and hopefully y'all enjoy it as well. But we're seeing Soul open up with, set 1 monster, set 4 pass. Monster could be a morphing jar potentially. Also, they could have like an Imperial Order set to stop things like Heavy Storm from coming down here. Heavy Storm is legal in this format at 2 copies. No Harpy's Feather Duster yet. That comes out in the next format, which would be Joy Pegasus. But Heavy Storm is still a major threat that you do have to consider. But this seems like a pretty strong opening from Soul if they are going for this sort of play. So let's see how Kesha actually responds to this. They're going to fire a Nobleman of Crossout here. We see an Acid Trap Hole come down on the Morphing Jar. This is kind of an interesting interaction. So Acid Trap Hole will cause the Morphing Jar to flip up. It won't get banished off Nobleman. And its effect will go off. So very interesting tech, and this seems like Soul might be on a sort of empty jar strategy, as that is the main deck that would actually use Acid Trap Hole on a Morphing Jar in that way. But they hit a lot of powerful cards out of Kesha's hand, and wow, it looks like they're on a bit of a Water deck. Water is a very, very interesting strategy from Android format. You do have things like Aqua Spirit to act as extenders. You get powerful beat sticks like Giant Red Sea Snake. So Water is a deck that people do play in Android format, and very, very cool to see. But Kesha's going to set 3 as well, pass back to Soul, probably trying to play around things like card destruction, like Morphing Jars. There's no Book of Taiyu in this format that comes out in Pharaonic Guardian, but you know, there is still, you still want to avoid, like, you know, soul setting a monster, then activating Acid Trap Hole on their turn and just discarding an entire hand. So, yeah, pretty good setup here from Kesha. Also, I'm going to dive in to the general voice chat here. I like to just, you know, sort of be online when, you know, if people lose games and they want to hop in and discuss the games that they played, the format as a whole. And it's pretty good there. Painful Choice getting fired. Painful Choice, incredibly strong card in this format. It sets up the graveyard for things like Bazoo, like Skull Lair. So very, very strong. Also gets you a card to hand. And there are many, many good cards to send off Painful Choice as well. So, I'm just checking to make sure my comments are there. Oh, Hobby says, hoping to see Relinquished. I am also hoping to see Relinquished. Relinquished is a very, very cool card. And it's a combo, like, I think Relinquished is one of the earliest, like, combo decks in the game's history. And it's really, really cool to see how it evolves over, you know, a certain period of time. I think that, like, Relinquished peaks in Treasure and Imperial. I think those are its two strongest formats. But, you know, it is still playable in Android. There are still a lot of things you can do with it. And it's just a really sick card all around. So I'm also hoping to see people bring in that Relinquished spice. But yeah, it looks like Painful Choice is going to send Jinzo. Jinzo's honestly a very good send a lot of the time. Oh, no, it's not. I missed. That was in the hand before, yeah. They're going to send Change of Heart, Magical Hats, Call of the Haunted, and what else are we going to see here? Magical Hats, very interesting card as well. There's sort of like a Hats control deck that I think I featured on the channel back when I covered Imperial format. I think I didn't cover an Android, but basically what you can do is you can sort of use Magical Hats as sort of a jank Book of Moon. So if you have a flipped up jar or something, you need Magical Hats to set it back down, deck then a little bit. So very, very cool tech there. But yeah, so this to me indicates that Soul might have a monster in hand that they want to use with Magical Hats. They're also going to send Offering. Offering is kind of interesting in an empty jar deck because it prevents you from drawing, so it can help you manipulate your deck size, also removes a powerful opponent's monster as well. But Kesha's going to give Soul Call of the Haunted, which to me indicates that Kesha probably has an MST to deal with the call, because Call Bring Back Jinzo is very, very powerful. So Soul will again set one card here. And will they set the call, or will they sort of hold it in hand? I mean, if you set one card here, I feel like Kesha probably has the read that it's just going to be the Call of the Haunted. But, you know, if you set two, maybe there's a bit of ambiguity there. Kind of a bit. Ooh, Delinquent Duo hitting one card out of Kesha's hand. Just ripping out that last monster, probably, because it wasn't committed to field. But kind of an interesting play here. It's 1-for-1 removal, but you know, not necessarily the worst thing to do. And it hits an Amphibian Beast, so Kesha's on a bit of the spicy water decks. They got the 2400 beater there. Very, very cool to see. And unfortunately, unlike things like Terra King Salmon or, you know, Giga Gaga Giga, which come later, you can't actually really use a Legendary Ocean with this profitably, because, oh, double MST. We got an MST chain going on here. Hitting a Trap Hole, honestly, Trap Hole is probably a fine card to hit. Because, you know, it doesn't look like Soul's not on deck that's summoning out many monsters. But yeah, being level 6, you can't reduce level down to 4 with a Legendary Ocean, so kind of an unfortunate card, but it's still kind of cool to see. And 2400 is nothing to scoff at. I mean, Bazoo can get over it, but it's still kind of, you know, a decent boss monster, or decent enough one. Kesha's just going to attack into the set, not committing whatever card is in hand to field. Could mean that that card that they drew is a monster that they don't want to bring out. Could mean that it's something else. They're going to hit into a Mask of Darkness there. Mask of Darkness will be able to get back a trap, maybe one of the ones sent off of that Painful Choice, like a Torrential Tribute or a Magical Hats. They're going to add the Torrential Tribute back to hand. Now Kesha has to be wary of that Torrential Tribute from here on out. Oh, or not. Kesha's just going to tribute out a Jinzo of their own, and that's going to be very, very powerful. It shuts off that Torrential, shuts off, you know, the call, and MST will hit a Skull Lair, which would have been, honestly, Skull Lair isn't really that good for Kesha, but at least it's hitting another card in the back row. So Soul can sort of just, like, potentially get over that Jinzo. I mean, Soul is really, really high up on card advantage right now. The Morphing Jar really helped with that, I think. Oh, well, I mean, this is telegraphing something here. Oh, the offer. Okay, it looks like they've got another offerings here. So they won't be drawing next turn, but they are going to be able to get in for 14. And honestly, you know, when Ketch's this low, that's pretty good. Also, they do have the call to bring back the Jinzo. They'll be able to get in for another 2,400. And Kesha is in top deck mode. Any trap that they draw will not help them here. Things like Bazoo will indeed help. But, you know, it's still a bit of a tough situation for them to be in here. They're going to bring out Grizzly. Grizzly is honestly not a bad card to draw here because it does clear the Cannon Soldier and get out another monster on field. So it does deck thin as well. But that's the last Grizzly left in the deck. So a bit of an awkward spot to be in. Now, Revival Jam can be a card we can see in a water deck as well. But, you know, it's not really the most overwhelming card, and Soul can just keep pressing the offensive here and probably be in a decent enough position. But Jinzo's going to hit in to the Grizzly there, getting in for 1,000. Now let's see what Kesha actually brings out off the Grizzly. Nothing like Sinister Serpent in this format. Oh, no. Okay, we are back. So I disconnected briefly. That's unfortunate. But we are back. Okay. Sorry about that. But yeah, so the Revival Jam just walling up here. This will cost Kesha 1,000 life points per turn if they do want to keep bringing it back. So we'll have to see if they do actually want to bring it back. They are indeed going to pay the 1,000. Let that go to grave. And this is a bit tricky. I'm also not really the biggest fan of Revival Jam in general in this format because your opponent can always just bring out Kaiku and hit in directly, banish the Revival Jam from grave after it's used its effect. But I mean, I guess if you see Kaiku coming, then you're not going to use the Revival Jam's effect, so maybe it's not really as big of a deal as I'm saying, but I'm not the hugest fan of Revival Jam or this sort of like water deck, but I mean, it's still cool to see it experiment with, and it is hype when it actually does get to do things. So Ketcha will be able to bring back that Revival Jam in the standby phase there. And now let's see what they're actually going to do with it. They're in a really tough spot here. Soldier's really up on cards, and they're sort of struggling for their life. They're going to go for a duo here, dropping down to 1,200. This is a bit of a risky play because you are dropping really low on life. You are ripping 2 cards out of the hand, which is nice, but still, I mean, you know, you got to find a way to deal with that Jinzo or do something here. But I mean, maybe there's just depriving Soul of more options, but still a really awkward spot to be in if Soul draws another monster here to summon out and hit in directly, and that will be the end of the game likely. But yeah, I mean, with Jinzo on field, there aren't really too many spells that do things here, and Tomato likely will wrap it up. Yep, and that will indeed be the end of the game. Even if Kesha had, like, Offering to the Doomed, which is basically the one thing that could interact with that board and sort of buy them a turn, they wouldn't be drawing next turn, so it likely just would have been the end of the game there either way. So, yeah. Not the best game one for Kesha, but still a very, very interesting game one nonetheless. And very cool to see both players on something new there. Let's hop into one of the other games going on here. Let's see Colgate versus Aratos here. This seems like a bit more of a standard deck matchup, although we do see Dark Necrofears. So it looks like Colgate is on Dark Necrofear here. Dark Necrofear, another fun jank deck. And another deck that manipulates the graveyard. I mean, we see all these decks that sort of are manipulating the graveyard in some way, and that's very cool to see. Unfortunately, for Colgate, Necrofear is kind of rough into, like, Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. But, you know, these Gemini Elves that Colgate has are very, very good against Kaiku. So, yeah, and let's see, how many Fiends do they have? They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Fiends. Seems like they're on a bit of a jankier Fiend strategy than a lot of people do it. Like, a lot of people don't play the Lodgins as well. But, you know, we're seeing that here, and very, very cool to see. So, Rage is sending a Jar of Greed, Jinzo, Trap Hole, MST. MST could clear a call, you know, pop a Gemini Elf. So there's that. But this also might just be the setup for, like, a Reborn play, or called the Haunted play of their own, with the Jinzo and Grave. So, you know, I feel like if you're Colgate, you might just give them, like, the Jinzo, because at least it isn't engraved to be revived. And it looks like they are indeed going to do that there. So Jinzo will get added to hand. And yeah, let's see what they do with that. They might have Change of Heart too. Change of Heart would be really good here. You could Change of Heart the set monster potentially, Change of Heart one of the elves, and just get over the others. Now, if you Change of Heart the set monster, there is the risk that it's like Sangan. Okay, duo coming down here. So it seems like Aratos has a plan because they're down to 1,100 now. So that's pretty low life point. They hit the third Necrofear out of the hand, so they don't have to worry about Necrofear anymore. And Colgate will also pitch a Karibo. It makes sense. They're pretty high on life, so they don't quite need the Karibo there, but still very cool to see Karibo seeing play in this deck as well. Now what will Ratos do here? Were they just doing the duo to get more information, or do they actually have a play here? That's one nice thing about the hand rips, at least. Like, they allow you to get information on your opponent's stuff. Okay, Reborn coming down here for Colgate's Jinzo. So, even if they didn't get a Jinzo of their own engraved there, at least they've got that Jinzo. And Colgate is thinking on that. Maybe they've got an IO to respond to the Reborn. Oh, they got Solemn Judgment. That will also stop that Reborn play there. Might put an end to the game, honestly. So we'll have to see what Aratos does from here. Both players are relatively low life at this point, and this format is relatively explosive. So we're just checking Colgate's graveyard, seeing what they've used up. They're going to bring out a Bazoo here. Bazoo, very, very good at getting over things like Elf. Also, when you've got a graveyard as stacked as Aratos's, you can feel free to banish 3. Banishing 2 jars and a Time Seal. Bazoo attacking into one of the elves, and that will indeed go through. So that means no Mirror Force set likely. But yeah, that's Aratos going to set 2 of their own, pass back to Colgate. MST firing in the end phase, just hitting one of those back row, knowing about Jars of Greed and things. And that will indeed hit a Jar of Greed. So it worked out there for them. Maybe they could have saved it for like a Call of a Haunted potentially that would come down, or like an IO. But I think this is ultimately fine if you know your opponent is on a lot of Jars of Greeds or Time Seals or any of those sorts of chainable traps. It makes sense. But you could also sort of argue to hold the MST because they've gone through so many of those chainable traps. So, bit of an interesting spot to be in there. Fisher, though, likely will wrap up the game. MST also, yep, that will indeed be the end of the game there. So, very, very intense game 1, it looked like. So, we got Colgate on the Necrofear, Aratos on a more standard build. Let's dive into another game. Let's just keep seeing what people are on here. We got Dump Truck versus Patrick Star here. If Dueling Book will load. Yep, there we go. Seems like Patrick Star is on a bit of an empty jar deck. Maybe similar to Soul's deck, maybe not. But let's see. Maybe there's a ruling question going on here. Either way, it looks like there's a bit of a rough spot for Dump Truck to be in here. They do have 7,000 life points, but they've only got 8 cards in deck. Needleworms are being played. So, yeah. Not sure if there's a ruling question. It doesn't say anything about being attacked while face down. That Cretan, are they talking about Cretan? Cretan, as long as it's been flipped face up, whenever it leaves the field, it will trigger its effect. So it doesn't necessarily need to be attacked. It can just be, flip summoned, and then you can fire like a TT or something, for instance. You can do a lot with Cretan. So, yeah, I'm not sure what exactly the ruling issue is here, but if it's that, then that's a relatively simple one. So let's check in the locals channel, see if there's anything there. Looks like nothing about that there. But if either of them is watching the stream and wants sort of advice on that rulings thing, then just let me know. Message me on Dueling Book, or just mention in the comments of this stream. Also, if you're watching this stream and have not given a like, definitely do leave a like on the stream. It really helps out a lot, helps visibility, helps get more people watching these things, joining the community, playing in these locals, and making them even better for the future. So it looks like Patrick Star is going to go to battle phase, hit into the set. Now, do they know about what that set is? It's Magician of Faith, so that's very, very good for Dump Truck there. Also, Patrick Star won't take damage, so very, very good for him as well. Denver has to think about what exactly to get here. I think there is an argument for maybe Dark Hole. There's also an argument for Knock as well. There's an argument for a couple things here. It's not the most standard choice. I mean, Painful is definitely not the card to take here. Reborn, there's an argument for as well. Nobleman will get added, though. So, potentially Noblemaning their set card there. Potentially, having a way to deal with whatever the Cretan brings back. Like if it brings back Needleworm, that gives you a way to deal with that. So I think Nobleman is a fine choice there. Yeah, either Nobleman or Dark Hole would be a fine choice, honestly. Nobleman also gives you sort of flexibility where like if your plan is to bring in a monster attack, oh, okay, that's just going to be the end of the game. Dump Truck did not have a way to deal with that Cretan. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I don't know, I feel like there are some lines you could potentially do. I mean, we don't know everything that Patrick Star had or everything that Dump Truck had seen on that current board state. I think there were some lines that you could do maybe, especially bring back Cannon Soldier off Spear Cretan. It could open up some possibilities for things to do. You had the knock for the short term. I don't know. There might have been things to do there, but I mean, again, we haven't seen the whole game there, so we don't know what they've got. But yeah, and then the last game I think in round 1 is going to be History of Waiju 1 versus Danny Droid. So let's get in there, see what they're working with as well. And we don't know if this is like game 1 or game 2. I think it's probably game 2 or game 3. Oftentimes History of Waiju 1 hosts singles, which doesn't let you see the match record there, which is quite unfortunate, but you know, I assume given how long this local's been going on already and seeing the current state of the board, this is probably game like 2 or 3. So, Fisher on the Dream Clown makes sense here. Dream Clown is a pretty decent Rat Box target. Seems like History of Waiju 1 is on a Rat Box deck. Rat Box is another deck that's seen some experimentation in this format. Another very interesting deck to see. Painful Choice coming down here. Very, very strong card in this format because it fills up your graveyard so much. Gives you a powerful card to hand. So let's see what exactly History of Waiju 1 wants to send. Danny is going to flip up Skull Lair in response, just, you know, to sort of prepare. MST is going to be hitting that Skull Lair there. So that will stop that from going through. I think, honestly, I think that might have been a misplay. Unless, if you're searching out a card that will get back a level 3 monster, then it's fine. But I think you just save, like, because if you're worried about them hitting a level 4 monster, right? Skull Lair has to pay its cost to actually activate. And if you fire MST on the Skull Lair after it's paid its cost, you can generally chain the Skull Lair to the MST activation and then banish another chunk of cards as well. But you know, Danny does not have enough cards in their grave to actually make that work right now, unless Dump Truck is planning on making a play here to sort of clear away some cards that they've got. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like you just save the MST for the Skull Lair in most cases there. But I mean, it is fine. It's like not the worst play in the world, and it's Danny Droid's gonna do with it. So I think that, you know, it's just good to have there. But the reason why Danny probably flipped up Skull Lair at that point is because the way that continuous traps work in this format, if they have an effect that you sort of have to sort of declare afterwards, like an ignition effect on a continuous trap. You know, I know that that's not the for traps here, but if they do have that sort of effect, like Skull Lair, like Ultimate Offering, etc., it does have to be face up on the field before you actually can do that effect. It's kind of like if you're familiar with like Royal Oppression rulings in GOAT format. In GOAT format, Royal Oppression is a much worse card because you can't actually chain it to a special summon. You have to already have it face up on field to use its effect. Same sort of thing here. So yeah, it's a testament to how good Skull Lair is in this format that it still sees played despite that. But yeah, it's just like it makes sense why Danny flipped it up there, depending on what Dump Truck sent. I mean, you could also just you could have just flipped it up at the end of Resolution, I think, but I don't know. I think it's ultimately fine. Let's see what Danny gives them. They could give them the Jinzo. You know, like I've said, Jinzo is generally a good card to give because, you know, if there's Call of the Haunted or something like that, you can get back Jinzo. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see what they do. Yep, they are indeed giving back the Jinzo there. So, you know, playing around like Monster Reborn or something. Now, if History of Waiju 1 has Monster Reborn or Call of the Haunted, they could just like Reborn or call like the Dream Rat or the Dream Clown or the Giant Rat and still get it there, but I think it's fine. Jar of Greed is going to get fired there, drawing a card for Danny in the end phase there. And they're going to draw another card. They're going into main 1 here. Let's see what they do to deal with that set. Oh, Change of Heart, really, really good here. Hitting that set, and they will be able to take it. Now, we're unsure if History of Waiju 1's playing like Magician of Faith or things like that, but ooh, that does let Danny tribute out their own Jinzo. Now, unfortunately, that Sangan is going to be kind of annoying for them because History of Waiju 1 will also get a search off this, so it's not quite like as good a trade as Danny would have liked here, especially when History of Elijah 1 is searching out a Nimble Manga, which is a very annoying card for Danny to deal with. That will be able to get History of Elijah 1 back a ton of life points. But, I think ultimately it's still a good card for History of Elijah 1 to get. Now, there is also an argument here for History of Elijah 1 searching out Giant Rat instead of Mamanga, because the idea is if Danny has 3 monsters on field, they can clear away all the Mamangas that History of Elijah 1 brings out, whereas if History of Elijah 1 just, set a rat, and then Danny hinted the rat, and then History of Elijah 1 brought out a Mamanga, then it's a bit more resilient to board, as in they'll likely have a monster left at the end of that turn to then tribute off for Jinzo. But I think it's still ultimately a fine enough play. And it looks like Danny's just going to, set 1, pass back to History of Elijah 1, saying, like, I know that you can get out of Jinzo here either way. I'm just going to force you to not use the life point effect on the Mamanga. History of Elijah 1 is going to bring out a Gemini Elf here, crash into Danny's Gemini Elf, just clear both those. And, yeah, I don't know. Do you crash into that, or do you crash into the set, maybe? The set's probably like Magician of Faith here, right? Because that's really one of the only monsters that you wouldn't just commit to the board to hit over all the Mamangas. But yeah, Pot of Greed coming down there on the draw. Oh, it's a Man-Eater Bug. Okay, that is another card that you definitely would just set there instead of attacking in. So probably honestly good that they hit into the Gemini Elf there, because if they had hit into the Bug and Bug popped the Mamanga, then, Danny would be able to attack the Jinzo into the Elf, attack directly with the Elf. So it would have been a bit worse for them. Ooh, Kaiku coming down here. I mean, this is the end of the game. Yep, that will indeed be the end of that game. Was that game 2 or game 3 is the question. And who won the first game? So, let's see. Yeah, Man-Eater very, very good in this format against a lot of potential decks. I'm assuming by the way that they're talking that this is the end of the match and not just the end of this one game. So yeah, I assume that's the end of the match. That's the sort of thing that, you only really do at the end of the match. So Danny will be moving on to the next round there, facing off against PJ Arts of Darkness there. So yeah. I mean, if that's not the end of the match, then they're doing very unfortunate things there. But yeah, looks like Ratbox fell in round 1. Let's dive into some of the other round 1 games. Let's dive back into Soul versus Kesha. Looks like they're still in game 2. Oh well, this might be the end of the game coming up soon. Looks like Soul is in a pretty commanding position. I mean, definitely there are things that Kesha can do to win the game here, but Aqua Spear coming down, honestly not a bad card to do. This will be able to switch the Bazoo to defense on Soul's turn and prevent them from attacking in with that. But the awkward thing here is that, if you hit into the Witch of the Black Forest, then Soul gets a search of something like, Kaiku or Gemini Elf. And that would be bad too. So it looks like Kesha is not even going to attack into the Witch, just using the Aqua Spirit to turn the Bazoo to defense, and basically have a way to just remove the Bazoo. Now, there is also another thing that Soul could do here, where Soul could potentially on their turn crash the Witch into the Aqua Spirit, search out a Jinzo, and then tribute over the Bazoo. But at that point, then Kesha can just switch the Jinzo to defense on Soul's next turn. So it may not be the most optimal thing in the world. I'm just going to check on the comments here. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't seeing many comments for this, but I just wanted to double check there. I know that sometimes we have just slow streams for comments. But sometimes it's just like I check the comments on my phone, and sometimes my phone just like glitches and doesn't show all the comments. So yeah, but
Hello.
hello, welcome to the stream. So you were playing a Ratbox deck, it looked like. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And how did that go? Did you win any of the games that you were playing in that? Or
Yes.
Okay, so
I won game 1.
Okay, but
And yeah, all 3 games are basically I had the better hand game 1 and just won. And he had the better hands games 2 and 3 and just won.
I don't know. It looked
That's basically what happened.
It looked like it was a bit even relatively in that game 3. Like it didn't seem like one player opened like too brokenly or not.
He had Fissure for my
and Fissure is not one of the broken cards in this format.
Clone. No, it's like I'm not talking about it's broken. It's like he had the better hand.
No, but like I don't know. I feel like
he had the better hand, B-Sox. That's all. It happens.
I don't know about like, listen, I don't want to get too much into this, but I think in general, unless the hand is like Raigeki Dark Will Change of Heart, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, or something like that, right? Like, I think in general there are things you can do to sort of like fight back against. Like, I just think it's unproductive to, sort of reduce games to like, oh well, I lost. He had the better hand, and the better hand being like a Fisher, right, or like a Manual Bug there. Because other things that like you can potentially play in a different way, do slightly different
In game
things.
3, there is one thing I could have done instead of go for Momanga. To get Cyberjar.
Yep,
But I don't know what he had.
Yeah, but
That's all.
Cyberjar is an
That's the only
option.
thing.
Like off the painful, you
Yes.
could have sent different things potentially. Like,
I
what
sent
I'm
things I
saying is
didn't want
like
to
a lot
draw.
of the times, the excuse like, oh, they had a better hand, that does apply in some situations. Like sometimes your opponent has like opens like pot, IO, like etc., and they just win the game that way. They like steamroll you. You don't have a chance to do anything. But I think a lot of the times, like if there is a relatively balanced hand from both players, I think that just saying, oh, he had a better hand is like sort of defeatist and not really a good analysis of the game. But I mean, that's just my read on that. I didn't see game 1 or 2, so I didn't know. But yeah, but Kesha's actually managed to turn around the game here a bit. Now, so we'll be able to search out Gemini Elf, but Kesha has the Forceful for that, so this can potentially turn things around. I mean, IO is going to be really good there, and yeah, that will stop that play from going through. But still, it's kind of cool to see Aqua Spirit controlling a board in this manner over the course of a couple turns. It's still not the best situation for Kesha to be in here because that Gemini Elf will be able to come out and hit over that Aqua Spirit. But at least it's like Soul had a very, very commanding offensive board state, before, and at least that's been dismantled a little bit. So very cool to see here. And it looks like Soul will indeed pay the 700 for order. I think that is probably the smart thing to do because one of the reasons why Kesha could just be holding cards in hand is if they're things like, spells that, they don't want to commit to field to lose to like an MST or a Heavy Storm or etc. I mean, not to say that Soul would Heavy Storm their own board like that, but, I think it is a decent enough read just to say like, oh, Kesha's, got a lot of spells against this Imperial Order. So yeah, I think that was a good play on Soul's part. Now, the issue is that if Kesha is able to just keep walling up, then, that order can become more of a detriment than a help because Soul will drop down very, very low in life points here. But it might just be what they have to do to stay alive unless they can push for a lethal sort of outcome. Ooh, Acid Trap hole there.
So much.
So that is going to potentially just allow Soul to push in and win the game here. If they've got another monster at least, which I assume they probably do. Yep, Jinzo coming down here, and that will be the end of the game unless Kesha's got a Karibo. But I assume a Water Deck is probably not playing Karibo. And I assume that this is probably the end of the game. Yeah, that's the end of the game. Wow, very intense game there. Down to the wire, and it does show how like, how painful Imperial Order can be there. But I think it also showed how powerful Aqua Spirit can be a bit. So very cool stuff there. And Soul's going to be moving on with their very interesting deck. Very interesting to see like Acid Trap holes and things like that in there. So yeah, so Raiders going to set 3 and pass back to Colgate here. And we actually caught Colgate's deck earlier on stream, and it's a Necrofear sort of deck. So very cool to see. And it looks like it is 1-1 currently between both players. Cyberjar pops a Cyberjar. Very, very funny to see. That's a pretty powerful hand on Aratos' part, not gonna lie. Although the Bazoo cannot buff itself up during Colgate's turn, so but still, like, a decent hand to see here. Yeah, and seeing Pot on Colgate's side of things, very, very good. Also, the Solemn, the MST, the Mirror Force, all very, very powerful cards, but, that Heavy Storm might force out one of those Solemns there, so we'll have to see exactly how this turn goes. Looks like they're going to tribute that
Oh,
spirit for a
quiet.
Jinzo there. That's pretty good. They can beat over one of Aretos's beat sticks there. And it looks like they're going to go for Pot of Greed. So this is playing around IO a bit. And I think that's the smart thing to do. If you don't have MST, then this makes a lot of sense. And this is telegraphing that Colgate probably doesn't. Did we see MST go? I don't think we saw MST get added off of Cyberjar, but yeah, it's telegraphing that they probably don't have an MST. Fisher here on the Bazoo. Interesting use of Fisher, but
Ooh.
I mean, they might have some other thing to do here.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. When you read your phone, you'll see
No.
what he said.
Yo, I watched your Yugi Kaiba tournament coverage video. Good stuff. Glad to see people putting out more retro format content. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that like a lot of people were, I mean, outside of like Edison Goat and now like Tengu Plant, a little bit of Hat, there aren't too many people, showing off a lot of the retro formats that are really fun to play out there. And so I figured that I could sort of fill that void a little bit. And it's been a bit of a tough balancing act sometimes. There are only so many formats that I have time to cover. But I try and cover all the ones, whenever there's a new update in one of the ones that I've already shown off on the channel, I try and revisit that and show it off. So I'm glad that you enjoy it. And I hope that, if you want to play it with people, we've got a Discord server, link in the description. And that's a great place to find games in these formats. And, you also get to see games like the one that is going on now in the weekly locals. So the locals are anyone who's in the Discord can play them. And my stream cut out. That's the second time tonight. I guess my internet provider's like, this stream is too powerful. We can't show off this great Android gameplay. But yeah, this is the this is the Android without double charity. So it's not Joey Pegasus. It's the newer version. Yeah.
No Duster either.
Yep.
So
No Harpy Feather Duster. No Sinister Serpent. It is the
to be more careful with how you play.
Yeah. I personally like this more than Joey Pegasus, which is what people call the old version of Android, where you add in like Charity and Serpent and Duster. But yeah, it's cool to see what people come up with for this. Like, a lot of people view it as a tier 0 format, and I could definitely see it being a tier 0 format as, sort of just like sort of good stuff pile decks, or they're called Beast Spellcaster decks, Tomato Control, etc. They're sort of king in this format because like Bazoo, Elf, those are just such powerful beaters, and they make the format more aggressive. But there are some things that people can do with this format that we've seen in this locals here.
Lajin.
Yeah, Lajin we saw in one of the previous games where Colgate was playing it. And, Colgate's deck is a perfect example that, people are experimenting with other things. This is like a Dark Necrofear build, which, it might not be like the most competitive thing in the world, but it is sort of an interesting strategy to see experimented with at least.
Funny. Yeah. By this point, the only people historically that'd be playing Lajin were the people who didn't have Gemini Elf, Bazoo, or Kaiku. Lajin is basically the poor man's card now.
Yeah. Heavy coming down, meeting that Solemn that we did know about, but honestly, Aratos, was probably fine with. Oh, wait, Jinzo can't actually. Yeah, the Solemn is negated. Yeah, so yep, that will go through. Jinzo does stay on field though, because it negates the call. So Jinzo should still be on field. Yeah, and Aratos is pointing that out.
Yes.
I think. So, but yeah, that's oof. Yeah, I've done that before. Occasionally, you just forget that Jinzo is not one-sided.
Is immune.
It does affect your own
traps. It's immune, basically.
So, yeah. So yeah, the 4K is regained. The Jinzo should be on field as well. Because the call is destroyed, but like the Jinzo should still be fine there. Jinzo does not die. So let me just, yeah.
Part of me is wondering.
Jinzo doesn't die. Yeah, so it does not die. Because that's part of the trap effect. So, yep, it does indeed stay. But we're holding an Android tournament later this month. like a bigger tournament, one that takes place over multiple days, will likely feature a lot more people than this one. So if you are interested in Android format, definitely check that out. It's multi-day, so like 48-hour rounds, so there should be time to like schedule with your opponents, like whenever works for you to play. And they've been really fun in the past, and I'm really excited to see how this one does. As I think Android is like one of the more popular DM era formats, and one that also has potential to get even more popular. Um, there's been a lot of talk.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean that's why I
Yeah.
said I think. But
Yeah, it's a
you
bit
know,
controversial because of that tier 0 thing you said earlier.
yeah. But for me personally, like that's not really a big thing as long as the gameplay is good. But I do understand, like, there's been interesting discourse, I think, lately about what other Yu-Gi-Oh formats can sort of like blow up in popularity, like Goat and Edison did. And people come to it with different things. And I do think that for a format to actually like blow up in popularity, they do need to not be tier 0, which is unfortunate for Android.
Needs to
Because
be an attack. Yep, that's it.
yep, they did that. But I personally think just for like people playing it, it can be very, very fun. And I do hope that as time goes on and more retro formats are sort of shown off to the public and become more popular, I hope that people realize that like tier 0 is still pretty fun. Just Punch says, I feel like competitive Android has solid gameplay but boring deck building, but this would be super fun deck building for limited like progression or draft. And I think like
Yeah.
I do want to push back against one part of that statement. I do agree that the deck building is not as interesting as something like Yada format, for instance. But I do think that there are some interesting choices that you can make with the Android deck building. Like, I think where a lot of tier 0 formats shine in deck building is like figuring out how to tune your deck for the mirror match. And so that's where you get into things like, the debate between Trap Hole versus Torrential Tribute, because Torrential Tribute can completely wipe away your opponent's field. But also, do you want to preserve your own beaters more than you want to clear your opponent's entire field? So, it's kind of just very interesting sort of debates that can happen here. And so I do think the deck building is a bit interesting, but I do agree with you that I think that like in a progression series or a draft series, this would be like much more interesting from a deck building perspective. But I also say that I think that applies to a lot of formats, just because when you get into like a limited format, it sort of flexes different parts of your deck building skills. And oftentimes, like whether you win or lose in that sort of format or event comes down directly to your deck building. Whereas, like in Android, I think you can kind of be carried by your gameplay instead of the deck building.
Dump truck just got past Patrick Star.
Okay, good to know. So, yeah, it seemed like a very interesting match there. Patrick Star was playing Empty Jar, and we actually saw that win in game 1. But it wasn't quite enough there. And fun fact, Necrofear is the more broken effect here, where it can just keep coming back and taking control of the monster. But this is a way around it, because it only activates in the end phase. So if you MST in the main phase, then that will be basically the end of the game. Now, even through Karibo, I think this is still lethal damage. Because, like, let's say Karibo, yeah, because Karibo stops the Gemini Elf, but that's still 3,200. It's still 2,000 on top of that. I think it's lethal even through 2 Gemini Elves. So, yeah. Very, very cool stuff there. And Ratos will be moving on to the next round. Yeah, so we're all in round 2 now. Let's dive in and see another match here.
So, yes, DL with it, yes. Anything but MST.
Yeah, if it was anything but MST, though, I mean, yeah, but MST is often played at 3 copies in these formats, so not the most unlikely thing that they could have had. And yeah, but it is unfortunate when, like, there's a card that just clears it. I mean, yeah, I mean, Raigeki also would have done it, I think. Like, there were some other cards that could have done it there. But yeah, MST was definitely disastrous for that. But we actually get to see some Skull Lair gameplay action here on the in this game here. And we do see like what I was talking about earlier, where like MST on Skull Lair after it's done its cost and there aren't as many cards in graveyard is really, really powerful. It deprives your opponent of a lot of future resources. And it's just like, I mean, it also stops the destruction. So it's like, it's really good. to do. And it's also one of the more skill-intensive parts of the format, knowing when to sort of MST the skull layers, when to let them go through. Yeah, I
Low
mean,
resource game now.
yep. I mean, yeah, they lose the Jinzo. That's true. But I still think they win because you would have had 500 more life points. But with only one Karibo, I think there's still enough damage dealt there that they win the game there. If you had
Oh,
two
I'm talking
Karibo,
about
I
the
think it's a
current
different matter. But
match we're watching.
no,
The Judgment on the Tomato.
yeah, no, Judgment on the Mirror Force to get over the
So yeah,
tomato.
true.
But yeah, very interesting play there. I'm not sure. I mean, it must mean that PJ is very low on monsters. Um, because most of the time you wouldn't necessarily do that. Because you're still doing okay on life points, and Mystic Tomato floats into another monster. So I feel like this means that they just don't have, like, they need that General
Looking
House
at
to stick one way or another.
yeah,
So,
looking at the graveyard, Change of Heart's already been used, so can't win the game that way unless one of those cards is Snatch Steal.
yeah, Snatch Steal has not been used on Danny's part. Um, and neither is Change of Heart on Danny's part. So that could potentially win the game here for Danny. But yeah, on PJ's end, PJ cannot win through change anymore. But Snatch Steal would potentially do it if Danny doesn't set another card here. I think Danny is indeed going to set
There
another
it
card
is.
there. I think it is safer to do that because, even if there's Raigeki coming down, at least you get the Witch Search. So, and Raigeki does indeed
Raigeki.
come down. Ooh, hitting a Morphin Jar.
Oh,
That is pretty good, honestly, for Danny, I think. Or for PJ, I think. But PJ might have also wanted the draws there, depending on what they've got. But this could just be the end of the game, honestly, right here. If Danny doesn't search out like Karibo and PJ has another monster here. Yep. Oh,
it's
exact
game.
lethal. And yeah, that will be the end of the
Not
game.
even
I
wasting
mean,
time with the card effect.
yeah, I mean, you could potentially attack him with White Magical Hat first to get a bit more information on what Danny's playing if you don't hit the bazoo. But I think that's just a very, very minor thing. And yeah, still very
Yeah, in
cool.
this format, it's a lot of the cards are basically the same if you're playing BS or something.
Yeah, but you never know. It's like,
Yeah, not fully.
I'm just speaking of like the hypothetical, like optimal play there. I think the hypothetical like best play there would be to attack him with White Magical Hat, but it doesn't matter for PJ because they win either way. So I'm not trying to say like, oh, I can't believe PJ didn't do this thing because like it's a very minor thing that you gain from it potentially, and ultimately they still win the game there, so it doesn't really matter. But I think it's good to think about that sort of thing. So yeah. Okay, let's dive in to another one of the games here. I like to, in siding, just sort of go into the other games just to see what everyone's doing. So we got a Ratos
Still on
versus
game
Hoy
one.
as well. Ridge is in a pretty commanding position this early on in the game here. Hoy's also
Wait,
gone through
huh?
all three Momongas already.
A 60 card deck.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I mean, it seems like they've got a bunch of searchers. They got Last Will as well. So it looks like the 60 cards are kind of like, so they don't draw double Momongas. They probably don't draw double Germs. They likely are on Germ as well if they're playing this sort of deck. Very interesting to see. And like, deck count is another aspect where like, definitely is room to experiment. I mean, we've seen that going on in Yugi Kaiba very recently with the Yugi Kaiba coverage that Dewey mentioned earlier. But I think that's a very interesting when a format evolves to the point of people experimenting beyond the 40 card deck count. I think that's a really, really cool place for the format to be. Of course, in Yugi Kaiba, partially it's because Stall Mill is the heavy is going to be pretty good there for Ratos. It does get rid of their own Imperial Horde, which is quite rough, but also, Hoy's on so little cards there. This might just be the end of the game, honestly, because Ratos is likely playing a Cannon Soldier as well, which can search out Cannon Soldier. Mystic Tomato can float into Cannon Soldier. So very risky spot for Hoy to be in here.
Yes. I think the witches should have been rammed instead. So if he had Cannon Soldier in the deck, he could search it out and just have it ready.
I mean, I guess, but like also I don't really think that's necessary. Oh,
Oh,
Morphing Jar number 2. Yeah, so maybe that is indeed
yeah.
the correct play there to ram the witches, because Morphing Jar number 2 is going to be quite annoying for a Ratos if that does manage to resolve there. Pot of Greed coming down as
Oh,
well,
pot of greed.
drawing 2 more. But yeah, actually the Cannon Soldier wouldn't quite be lethal anyways here, so might not have really mattered. And since it isn't lethal,
Uh,
it probably, yeah, I think it's fine
if
either
not,
way.
could have grabbed onto the triangle
Well, I don't think the
instead.
triangle's worth it to crash the witch. I think if you're going for lethal and you crash the witches for cancel, I think that's worth it. But otherwise, maybe not. Um, Now, if you're a Ratos, you've got the question of how do you deal with that morphing dart number 2, and do you just like ram into it and
There's
have Hoy not
Fisher.
mill anything, or do you just let them flip it on their turn so that way they have to mill as well? It looks like they're just going to ram here. I think that is correct
See?
because Hoy could also hit another morphing dart number 2 of their own,
Oh,
which obviously would
oh,
not be the best.
oh,
But yeah, Ray's just
pain.
hitting a lot of powerful cards
Such
there. But
pain.
yeah, I mean, Cannon Soldier was hit, so that is something. So they do have a potential lethal line if they draw another monster here. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they get to shovel, but it might not matter in the end here. It depends on if Hoy is a monster. They do
Oh,
need to have a monster. It is a Cannon Soldier there. Oh, but Skull Lair comes
it's
down. Yep,
game.
Skull Lair
Never
will be
mind.
able to stop that. Banishing 4, so the Morphing Jar number 2 actually ended up helping Aratos a little bit there. So they are able to banish, or not banish,
Yes.
get rid of that tomato.
This card.
Oh, and
This.
that's the end
Never
of the
mind.
game.
GG.
Yep.
Yep. If that was Mirror Force, this wouldn't have been so bad. But nope.
If it was Mirror Force, it would have been the same outcome. So I'm not sure. Oh, you mean the last card for Hoy?
Yeah. So
Oh,
Mirror
okay. I
Force
thought
that
you
would
were
have
talking about
saved
Skull
him.
Lair. But
No.
yeah. Um, but they're gonna go into game 2. So cool to see Hoy on some interesting text there. Unfortunately, didn't quite work out with them in game 1, but maybe in game 2 it will help them out a little bit. But let's dive in to another match. I think it's just Hoy Ratos and PJ Danny. So let's dive into the PJ Danny match again. See how that's going on there. And okay, it looks a pretty interesting game state. Yeah, honestly, it's hard to tell who's favored at this point. I mean, it still looks very early in the game, relatively. But anyone with IO up is in a pretty decent spot, honestly. And it looks like Danny is
It's his
thinking about
advantage.
whether to pay for it or not. They are indeed paying for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Apparently, it's Danny's advantage because of that IO. IO being the most broken card in this game right now.
yep. But it depends on what PJ's got here, because if they've got something that will sort of like wall up that tomato a little bit, and that could be kind of annoying. Mirror Force also to clear the
Yeah.
tomato. Kind of rough for Danny.
Hmm.
But Danny can probably just set another monster from their hand and
Or summon.
sort of be fine. Well, yeah, but like
Yes.
summoning opens you up to like more problematic sort of game states. So look, they're just gonna set one pass back to PJ. Is this telegraphing like a Trench Tribute? Maybe. So if you're PJ, you might just have the read that it's TT. They're gonna bring out a white magical hat here. TT does get fired. That set has to be something like Witch or Sangan to make it worth it. Oh, it's just a 4-star Ladybug of Doom. I'm kind of curious why they didn't save the Mirror Force then, because 4-star Ladybug of Doom could clear the tomato. Yeah, a bit awkward there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, ultimately not. I mean, it depends on what Danny's got here, but we'll have to see how it turns out. And we don't know exactly what else is in PJ's hand. Oh, they get to pull off their own pot of greed. Very, very strong there.
Yes.
Yeah, this is gonna be
It'll
pretty
be
rough.
worse to a hand rip card.
Well, that'd be pretty bad. But we'll have to see exactly what Danny does here. They're gonna bring out a Witch of the Black Forest. Tack in for 1100.
Oh, never mind.
That's gonna be pretty.
I thought someone joined us.
Oh, did they?
So it just like
okay.
that, just quick.
But yeah, this is a pretty rough spot for PJ to be in. Oh, and also the Skull Lair too. So 9 cards in grave. Yeah, this is not looking good for PJ. They're in a really, really bad spot here. And they're just passing back to Danny. Danny can potentially bring out another monster, and they are indeed going to bring out another monster. Bring out that Bazoo there. And they are indeed going to banish. They've still got enough cards in grave, so that way they can banish off the Skull Lair. Although, if PJ does have an MST here, then that might be pretty bad for Danny. So maybe they should have just banished 1, leaving 8 engraved. So that way they've got enough for, like, if MST comes down on a Skull Lair, you can still pop a level 4 monster that gets brought out. But, I mean, realistically, the only level 4 monster you're worried about here in the face of, like, Bazoo is, like, Kaiku. And Kaiku stops Skull Lair anyways. So I think it's ultimately fine. But we'll have to see what PJ does here. Very rough spot for them to be in. They're very, very close to death here.
Decision-making time.
Yep. And Darkhole is coming down,
And
clearing that board away. Pretty good, but
the
Danny does
witch will
get a
be
search
grabbing
off the
another
witch.
card.
Oh, and they're just passing back to Danny here. Yeah, kind of rough. Must mean
Okay.
that they must not have much in hand, but very, very unfortunate for PJ here.
I'm not even trying to bluff.
Yeah, well, they
Must
might not have the capabilities to bluff. I mean, we don't really know what PJ's got in hand. And, like, no matter what happens here, like, Danny summons out a monster here and tries to attack in. Like, no matter what you set, that's the play they're going to do. So, and they've got, like, 6 cards in hand, so they've got enough material here to probably be fine. But, yeah, it's just a bad spot for PJ to be in, for sure. But we'll have to see what they do. They are going to bring out that Kaiku. Kaiku gets in for 2 cards in the grave, potentially shutting off things like, Magician of Faith, Get Back Pot, or Darkhole, potentially shutting off things like Skull Lair if PJ draws that as an out. So yeah, just rough all around. Looks like Danny's going to banish that Darkhole. Are they going to banish the pot as well? They are indeed going to do that. So playing around like Magician of Faith.
Yeah, with Skull Lair in the field, he doesn't feel threatened by White Magical Hat, and the Ladybug of Doom is probably not coming back out set.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in this situation, there's not much that can threaten Danny here. Now, we might potentially, I mean, PJ's thinking, and they haven't done much with the 4 cards they've had in hand, so maybe there's something that they're going to do here to sort of turn the game around, but it is kind of unlikely at this point in the game. But we'll have to see what they attempt to do here.
Even with the higher...
Change of Heart is going to be pretty decent. You stop your opponent from using Skull Lair for this turn with the Kaiku up. They could also potentially tribute over that for a Jinzo later in the turn. Or they could tribute the Jinzo now and try and attack in for 2,400. But I feel like, honestly, you probably want to just hit in with the Kaiku to deprive your opponent of cards in the grave in case they manage to get the Skull Lair back online again. So, are we going to see a Karibo coming down for Danny? Okay, it looks like they're going to take the 18. I saw Danny typing, and so I was like, are we going to see damage step here? But nope. And it looks like Danny will PJ will banish the Elf and the Kaiku there. Just, and then tripping off for Jinzo, yep. So setting 1 now and passing back to Danny. Now, if Danny has like Change of Heart or Snatch Steal, that would be pretty bad for PJ here. But to be fair,
it's the end of the game, probably.
Well, yeah. But to be fair, if they've got that, you're probably losing the game here anyways. Snatch will come down on the Jinzo, and
functionally what we said.
Yep. I mean, in those, like, you got to go for it if you're PJ, because in those situations, you're functionally losing the game no matter what you set up. So, yeah, I think it made sense for them to do that. It's just unfortunate. Danny did indeed have that Snatch Steal. Let's dive into a Ratos versus Hoist. Yeah, they're doing. We see a Labyrinth Wall. That's really cool. We did see that they were on some giant rats, and now we see one of the targets for rat. Labyrinth Wall. Very, very neat card. 3,000 defense. Very tricky to
nothing
but
is getting over that.
Yeah, but I mean, there are some things that can clear this board though. And Aratus got IO up, but they can always let that IO fall and go for a major push. So yeah. Labyrinth Wall is a very, very cool card, though. Very, very cool to see people playing it here. 3k defense, nothing to scoff at. The IO is going to fall here, so Ratos likely has a way to push through this here. They're going to flip up a tomato, and that's going to be fine by Hoy. They're going to flip up a witch as well. That's also going to be fine by Hoy, so no TT here. And, very good that they didn't TT, because then Aratus would be able to get a search off Witch, search out another Kaiku likely to shut off the Skull Lair again, and get in for 18. Fissure on the Labyrinth
there's
Wall
the fissure.
will indeed clear it. I'm kind of thinking about the mechanics of a wall falling into a fissure, like a labyrinth falling into a fissure. Cyberjar is going to be very interesting.
Cyberjar.
Now, it's a little bit of a gamble when you've got a deck as thick as Hoy's to play a Cyberjar in this way. But they do hit some monsters, so and Gemini Elf will be able to hit into those monsters, but they do have enough engrave for that Skull Lair. No MSTs off the Cyberjar, so if Originals doesn't have a MST as well to pair with that, then that Gemini Elf might be getting popped here.
Almost certainly getting popped here.
Well, that's why I said if they didn't have an MST, but we'll have to see what exactly they do here. And they're probably just going to set the, they are indeed going to set the tomato and the Bazoo, because Bazoo can clear Elf on its own next turn anyways, or it can also potentially clear Jinzo as well. We do know that Aratos has Jinzo in hand, and Aratos is going to attack into the center set. Always going to think about that. Whether they want to go for the Skull Lair here or not. I feel like if that's the Bazoo set, you just got to go for the Skull Lair. If it's not, you can just let this go through, get a search out of your deck. But yeah, they are going to go for the Skull Lair. That's highly hinting that the set is indeed a Bazoo. But you still have enough engrave to pull off that Bazoo, banish there for 3, get it over a Jinzo. So they banish 4, and that will indeed go through, so Aratos likely to not have an MST there.
Yeah, the Aratos has yet to normal summon. So.
That's true. Pop the Gemini Elf there as well, because main phase 2 you can distribute over for a Jinzo. Dark Hole coming down here on the board, and Hoy did know about that, but I think this was still the correct play for them. But yeah, a bit of a tricky spot for them to be in here for sure.
Yes. Thanks to the Cyberjar, Aratos also knew that the Imperial Order was in the hand, which he's now going for.
Yeah. Dealing to duo here, firing to pitch 2 cards to grave. I mean, this does make your Skull Lair even more live, but I do think that this is ultimately a good move to do. And Aratos, it looks like lag has set in there. And it looks like they're back.
Okay. And he's back.
So, been a very laggy night. I mean, we've had connection issues a fair bit of the time.
Mirror Force is gone.
And
the second Skull Lair.
I believe that's the third Skull Lair, actually. Oh, no, it's just the second.
Oh.
I thought there was...
Yeah,
the Skull Lair was from the Cyberjar, yeah. But, yeah, that's the second Skull Lair. And Riz going to set one, set another, pass back. Oh, set another, indeed, and now pass back.
Yeah.
And this is setting him up for a Jinzo next turn. So, Hoy has to deal with
locking the Skull Lair. Yeah.
Change of heart on the set. Very good here. They could flip it up, Skull Lair it as well.
Or go for game. Depends.
Yeah, depends on what they got. But they might be able to go for it this turn, indeed. We'll have to see what they do here. We also don't know all of Aratos' background. I mean, we know about the Call of the Haunted, but should shut off most game attempts. Premature Burial here, going for probably a Bazoo. Oh, going for another tomato. This does
you don't need Bazoo if you're going for game.
A little bit more resilient, I guess. Yeah, this Skull Lair coming down for Aratos here. Hoy is thinking about that. They might have something here.
Yeah, it's MST.
Well, yeah, and if it's MST, you could potentially fire it here, because Aratos can actually chain Skull Lair to itself after they initially activate the Skull Lair here to get around the MST and still pop the monster. So yeah, they will change. So MST coming down on the Skull Lair, but Aratos can indeed banish 4 more to then pop that Mystic Tomato again, essentially. So they might not want to do it. They might want to leave cards in grave for themselves. but I feel like you can still do it. Okay, going for call here on a Kaiku to shut off their opponent's Skull Lair. And
get the tomato back.
oh, they're also just going to let the Skull Lair go. They're not going to do the banish there. But yeah, Tomato just crashing in to the Kaiku here, probably getting out like a Cannon Soldier. But this is unfortunate because 2 cards will get banished from Grave there.
I think Skull Lair should have been chained to the call here.
That's fine. What? You think what?
Should have been chained to the call here.
Well, that's what I was saying.
So
no, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Where I was saying they had that decision where they could indeed banish 4 to pop the Tomato still, while also going for the Kaiku. But they didn't want to do that. I mean, it makes sense they're getting back a Tomato here anyways, so they can crash the Tomatoes with Hoist Tomato here. And we're just going for a Pot of Greed here. Don't they know about the IO? Wasn't that... Maybe they're trying to bait it out? Maybe they got an MST?
Possibly.
But you can just tribute out a Jinzo here and be fine that way, I think. So, I don't know about that. Raigeki coming down on the Tomato there. And that will indeed go through, clearing the Tomato. And Ray's going to attack
strange.
in. Oh, wait, does the Raiders not have Jinzo? No, they did have Jinzo off the Cyberjar. So, call coming down for that Tomato. But, I mean, Raiders can crash their Tomato into Hoy's Tomato. Let's see, Raiders gone through 1 Tomato. Hoy has gone through none, though. So, it might not be the best trade here for them. So, it's a bit of a tricky situation to be in here.
You might see Morphing Jar number 2 again.
I mean, yeah, if they hit into like, Sangan or Witch after that search with Tomato, then they could potentially search out the Morphing Jar number 2, which is a very annoying card for Ratos to deal with. But
also,
it's kind of an awkward spot for them to do. Time Seal coming down here, so preserving perfect information here for Ratos. And Riz is going to switch their own Tomato defense, set another pass back to Hoy. No, they don't draw here because of the Time Seal. They must have forgotten to turn off auto draw there. But yeah, I mean, that happens sometimes. But yeah, Ratos has perfect information here. And the set might be Man-Eater Bug, which would be pretty bad for Hoy here. But Hoy is just going to hit into that Tomato, deprive Ratos of another Tomato to crash into their stuff. And Ratos is just going to bring out another Tomato. Hoy's just going to pass
because
back.
Witch and Sangan are already in the graveyard.
Yep. But other things like Cannon Soldier, etc. But, I think it's probably just good to send out another Tomato. Just, keep board presence. Another beater that you can hit him with stuff. So, yeah. Let's see what they do here, though. And they have to have some sort of plan with that set. Set could just be Magician of Faith as well. But it looks like it is indeed a Man-Eater Bug. Popping that Tomato. That will indeed pop the call as well. Oh, well, this is the end of the game. Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's maybe 1850, 3250, 5050 plus 2000 more. Yep. So that will indeed
it is.
be
this
the
is
end
enough.
of the game. Yeah. So yeah, very, very cool game here. Also showing the power of Time Seal, just shutting off your opponent from drawing. No way out of this situation here. And yeah, that's going to be all she wrote here.
Mass damage.
Yep. And let's see, did Ratos have... They didn't have an MST. That's surprising. I feel like they would have...
No. Yeah.
I feel like they should have gone for the Tribute Jinzo, although maybe they were just trying to bluff that they had an MST there. But...
PJ defeated Danny, by the way.
Okay, it looks like PJ defeated Danny and Ratos defeated Hoy. So let's put those in there. But yeah, we've got our semifinal matches, it looks like. Got a Ratos versus Soul and PJ versus Dump Truck. Very, very, these are duels who have made it to the finals of these locals quite a bit of the time. So very, very cool to see them all making it to these semifinals yet again. So, We also have a locals leaderboard now in the Discord server, so you can see who's won the most locals. And right now, the wins are tied between Aratos and Dump Truck at 5 locals each. So if they actually make it to the finals, that would be pretty exciting. Just seeing two like of the top local winners face off for the full crown. For now at least, would be kind of fun to see. But Dump brings out a Cannon Soldier, maybe telegraphing that they've got like a Change of Heart or a Snatch Steal here. Because there definitely is a Sangan. Well, I mean, I guess they could have drawn the Sangan, but there's Sangan, there are tomatoes. There's stuff left in the deck for Dump Truck to bring out here, unless they had terrible draws and just drew Sangan, tomato, tomato. But I don't think there's a terrible play. Yeah, it looks like the Change of Heart is there. Second Change of Heart, the Gemini Elf. And then you can get in for a ton of damage here. Banish 2 cards out of the grave as well, including that Jinzo out of the grave, which is very, very big here. Shuts off PJ from getting back that Jinzo later in the game. So very, very good turn for Dump Truck here. And yeah, it's going to be pretty brutal. Yeah, I think you just tribute off the elf and maybe even tribute off the cannon soldier too. But you might want to, yeah, it looks like they are indeed going to tribute off the cannon soldier. I like that play personally, but you could argue just to keep it around for the next turn. But
Especially with PJ's lack of cards. He's now in top deck mode.
Yeah, but
even if
the reason why you'd potentially go for the cannon soldier there is because if PJ draws like a tomato, they get to crash into the cannon soldier, get out like Witcher Sangan, and just leave that face up. It's still not the best for PJ, but like it at least clears a monster off of Dump Truck's board while getting deck thinning as well. So MST coming down on the back row, it's a Jar of Greed, so Dump Truck will be able to draw. And one of the reasons why Jar of Greed is so strong, it baits out back row removal like that. Also acts as a bluff for things like Trap Hole TT, potentially forces the opponent to play a little bit suboptimally. So very, very good for Dump Truck there. And honestly, even though PJ is still in this game, like if you're Dump Truck, oh, well, that's going to be the end of the game. You get back Change of Heart. And yeah, so Dump Truck won that one. Yeah, I mean, after the Change of Heart turn, it was honestly pretty over for PJ.
Happens in this format.
It does
While
indeed.
It's not as potentially sacky as later DM formats can get,
or even as earlier DM formats, even because I feel like
yes,
yeah,
I'm referring more to the official TCG ones. This format, like, yeah,
like because there are definitely some people who view, different power cards have different levels of powers in different formats based on what other cards are in the formats, right? So some people view like Treasure as a very, very sacky format because it has the 3 hand rips, but there aren't like as many power cards that there would be later. So the hand rips seem, sort of disproportionately powerful. I personally don't hold that view, but I know that some people do have that view.
It's conventional wisdom, basically.
Yeah, and again
about those cards in general.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the times when people test out these old DM era formats, the hand rips are maybe a bit less bad than they remember, or than they thought at least. But Convy hitting a Jinzo there. Looks like Razor's got a Mirror Force and a Torrential Tribute left in hand. Going for a Snatch Steal. Snatch Steal coming down on the Kaiku. I feel like, yeah, MST probably is in the future there. That will hit the Snatch, because like what are you setting if you aren't setting like Mirror Torrential, right? You're setting some back row like maybe Jars of Greed, maybe Time Seals, probably also an MST as well. So yeah, this means that the set that Soul has maybe it is Morphing Jar. I feel like if it was Morphing Jar, you save Comfy for later, but maybe it is Morphing Jar. I mean, they're telegraphing that it might be because they set their entire hand here, but
going for it.
Yeah, Reito's not setting the cards in hand. Mirror Force getting rid of that Kaiku there.
Yeah. Something I found about Morphing Jar in this format is that it can be problematic if you allow the opponent to trigger it.
Yeah. But I mean, That's why the Mirror Force is there. Also, Soul's playing like Acid Trap Hole and things like that. Judge Punch says that scoreboard is really cool. Firewater Discord has it now, and the badges are what deck you top with. I have 2 copies of Grunix next to my name. That's
Oh,
really cool. Reppin'
not Morphing Jar.
Fire Kings before it was cool. Well, actually, it's even cooler in Firewater probably than nowadays. But yeah, that's awesome. And we have the badges for like whichever format locals you won. So there's like Legend for Yu Kaiba and things like that. It's really cool and it looks really cool. And so big shout out to like everyone who suggested it and also Aratos who like put it together as well. So very cool stuff. Magical Hat's coming down here to sort of obfuscate where the Sangan is, also decked in a little bit with your spells and traps. The idea behind Mask Control, or Magical Hat's control, is that if you're playing things like Magician of Faith or, Mask of Darkness, you can also get these back, but also can just be used to deck in. Like Delinquent Duo and Forceful Sentry are a bit less good in the late game than they are in the early game. So, just using Magical Hat to deck thin a little bit, prevent like any dead draws. That can be pretty good. And I believe Magical Hats does have
one of early Yu-Gi-Oh that never got broken.
I wouldn't say it's one of the most broken cards in the early Yu-Gi-Oh because like it's good. Don't get me wrong. Like the Magical Hats control sort of thing is a very fun deck. Man, my OBS is cutting in and out. My Wi-Fi looks good though, but
yeah.
Yeah, okay, we are back. Okay, cool. Hopefully that interruption wasn't too rough for y'all out there. But yeah.
It's being slightly annoying, but not that bad.
Yep, that's the hope. And it looks like Soul's just gonna pass back to Aratos here. Aratos is gonna hint to what they know is the Sangan. Sangan will get Soulless Search here. But if it's something like Morphing Jar,
more deck thinning.
It's more deck thinning. But unfortunately, if it's something like Morphing Jar or something, then Aratos can sort of play around it a little bit. So something to consider there for sure.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about Acid Trap Hole.
Yeah.
If he does try to play around it, other than its knock protection, if he does try to play around the Morphing Jar, you can just activate it during the end phase.
Well, the issue is that the Morphing Jar isn't going to be set on the field this turn, right? So Aratos can just set cards from their hand now, right? So
potentially, yes.
Yeah, I mean that's what I meant when I said that Aratos could play around it. But I mean, they might not choose to do so. They might not respect the Acid Trap holes in the back row potentially. So, although it is potentially likely that Soul does have one because it does play around knock a bit. You don't want Sangan to get knocked, so definitely could be an Acid Trap.
It's game one though, so there's probably at most only one copy in Aratos' deck if he's even playing it.
Although Soul just searches out a Tomato instead of a Morphing Jar there, so Tomato pairs very poorly with Acid Trap Hole, so maybe they don't actually have Acid Trap Hole in the back row. But Soul's thinking here. They're shuffling up their hand. So they might have a couple different options for what to set here. Just Punch says, fun fact, later on when this card is flipped face up, you can effects like Gear Armor, Acid Trap Hole does cause things to miss timing. Oh, that is really interesting. And yeah, I guess that's unfortunate for Gear decks because honestly, having that as sort of like a response to things that can like Nobleman of Crossout, for instance, would be pretty decent. But I guess Gear decks do have other things that they can be doing instead, but it is
Gear decks are powerful in their time anyway, even without Acid Trap Hole.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a big loss.
Yeah, but it is kind of funny that Acid Trap Hole is basically a worthless card to put in those decks, or at least a card not really worth considering in those decks. Like it is, in DM era formats, I feel like a lot of empty jar decks, it is worth considering Acid Trap Hole at the very least, even if you don't play it in the main. Because like you've got to be thinking about like, if the opponent is playing Nox or things like that. But Acid Trap Hole is in the back row and it's getting fired on Aratos' monster. Instead, it's a Witch there.
Oh.
Not the best outcome there for Soul, but I mean, honestly, I don't know how I feel about that Acid Trap Hole in general. Because if it was like Magician of Faith or something, they get back the monster or the spell anyways. But I mean, the spell would just be MST, so it's not the most powerful Magician of Faith anyways. But like, Yeah, if it was like tomato, you'd probably just summon out the tomato and attack in because Mirror Force is in grave. So and like Soul
Yeah,
didn't search out like witch, so you could have the read that it is
yeah.
a tomato set, attacking in like Gemini Elf into the tomato and then crashing tomatoes. Um, but I guess they
Oh,
wanted to use up the Acid Trap hole before the Jinzo hit the field. So I mean, I guess that makes sense as well. Which we'll get a search here.
yeah. Though has with the bazoo in hand, Jinzo is probably not long for this duel.
Yeah, unfortunately. But we do know that Soul is on some other fun techs that can potentially protect the Jinzo, even while Jinzo is negating traps. So we'll have to see
Okay.
exactly what Soul does here. But I don't think this was a bad turn. I think even if Bazoo comes down and hits over Jinzo, Soul, I mean, this was probably Soul's best line. Um, but we'll have to see exactly what
Likely.
they do. They're going to search out the Bazoo with the Witch there. So, this might get into a bit of Bazoo battles. This Bazoo's hidden into each other. Um, that does hit over the Gemini Elf there. And they're going to pass back to Aratos here. Raiders is going to think about this because, uh, I mean, they know that Soul knows what they've got in hand to some extent. And so they're probably thinking, like, what is Soul's game plan here? What do I have to be worried about? What do I have to play around? And they're going to go for a dark hole here, clearing the Jinzo and bring out a masked sorcerer. Wow, getting in for a draw. Uh,
Ooh.
I like that play a lot, actually. Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool play. Masked Sorcerer doesn't really see much experimentation in Android format, but it is still a very, very strong card if you can actually pull it off, and this shows why. Just getting in for 900, drawing a card, very, very powerful in a format where card advantage is still pretty important. Soul's thinking. They're checking the graveyard to see what Aratos has got there. Probably thinking about what monster to commit into this. They're going to bring out a Kaiku here. Now, Trap Hole getting fired on the Kaiku. That's going to be pretty rough for Soul. We also know that Aratos has a TT, a Mirror Force, etc. So they've got plenty of disruption for battle. Pot of Greed coming down as well. Aratos just drowning in card advantage here. So not looking the best for Soul, all things considered. So and Aratos just going to attack in with a Mass Sorcerer, not playing into Torrential Tribute, not playing into any of that sort of thing. Firing a Duo as well, ripping 2 cards out of Soul's hand. This is not looking good for Soul here. And they're going to hit a Mask of
Ah.
Darkness. And Soul has to think about exactly what to pitch here. Justice Punch said that Mass Sorcerer and Can Soldier are definitely dark horse picks for a lot of early DM formats. Didn't see much play until this channel. Yeah, it's really interesting. Especially like, Critter onward, right? In Critter, like a lot of people have been playing Mass Sorcerer a lot because Mass Control was sort of the deck that everyone settled on as being like the quote unquote best deck. After more tinkering, like Critter's a bit like more diverse than people initially thought. But even beyond that, like looking at Critters, the success of Mass Sorcerer and Critter, people have tried to experiment with it in Treasure and Beyond, etc. But Cannon Soldier is a card that, like, I feel like a lot of people underestimated, like even when they were playing it in Critter. But like seeing it just take names, format after format, like all the way up to Android, even, just as a way to clear out, that last bit of life points that you need to get rid of. Very, very powerful thing. CS says, have you seen the history of the OCG thing by Simo, and what are your thoughts on it? Yes, I have, and I think that's really, really cool to see someone doing that. This is sort of an idea that I've seen a couple people, talking about, like after history of Yu-Gi-Oh sort of came out initially, where they're like, oh, well, there's a history of TCG. I wonder if anyone's going to do history of the OCG as well. But I do think that like it does also show why I personally am not going to be covering like the history of the OCG, like I'm doing with all these TCG formats. One, I'm more attached to the TCG because it's what I grew up with, and so I'm more interested in looking at the TCG for myself. And two, the gameplay in those initial videos, I mean, it is kind of rough. We've got Blah on the call right now, who's a much bigger fan of the OCG and much more knowledgeable about the OCG than I am. But it's
Hello again.
yeah, it's very, very sort of like, caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! In not the best way. Like, you could describe Yugi Kaiba as caveman Yu-Gi-Oh as well, but with Yugi Kaiba, there's like a lot of back and forth, a lot of very like skill intensive games and stuff. I feel like in the old OCG formats like that, I mean, there is some skill involved. Don't get me wrong. Like, you've got to know when to commit to certain things or not. Um, but I do feel like a lot of the time it's just sort of like the worst
Yeah,
aspects of Caveman Yu-Gi-Oh. When people think about the negative sides to Caveman Yu-Gi-Oh, they think of like the sorts of things that you see in the history of the OCG so far. Um, but
there are a couple of things they don't seem to know about that period yet.
oh,
Like,
like
for
what?
example, the trap hole at this point doesn't activate when you flip summon a monster
Oh, interesting.
because one, flip summoning doesn't exist yet as a term, and two, it's not on the card. Oh, duel's over.
Yep.
Let's see who won. Yep, Eratos won again.
Yep.
Oh, where was it?
Game
Yeah,
one at
like
least. Uh,
when you're summoning, you're just placing a card, either setting or just putting it face up, like Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician, or whatever. But because of that, you can set your big guys and either let your opponent flip them up yourself or flip them up on the next turn. But to counter that, Fissure destroys face down cards in this period.
Fisher does. Are you sure about it?
Yes,
Where's the
it's
document?
added. The documentation is the very errata. The first card does not say face up. And
Interesting.
it was
So how did the lowest
like
attack
that for a
thing?
few
How did the
months.
lowest attack thing work? Because you can't see the attack of a face down monster.
You just pick the face down monster of your choice.
Okay, because this seems to like I don't know. I'm not as familiar with this, but this seems like uh I'm kind of surprised by that
This
if
is
it's true. And it shows that
yeah,
the
this
game
is
was much
early
more
Yu-Gi-Oh.
broken
Yeah, this
than
is early
it
Yu-Gi-Oh.
seemed.
Really early Yu-Gi-Oh. People forget that when we got it in the TCG, a lot of questions were already answered, like, do set monsters have attack or not?
Yeah, but that doesn't seem like
Or
that doesn't seem necessarily a question issue. That seems like a broken card design issue.
yes, it's not
Like
it's a question. Like they questioned, like, for example, warrior elimination destroys warriors, right?
yeah,
People played it as if face down monsters had types of their own. And they had to answer that question in a rule card and later in the third edition of the starter book, even the second edition, third edition of the official rules, the rule book from the EX starter box. It probably was answered in the second edition too, but we don't have access to that copy.
yeah. Well,
We
I
just
mean, it,
barely know what's in there.
well, it's cool to see all the research that goes into the early OCG stuff. But also this is another thing why I'm not really covering the history of the OCG myself because there is a lot more uncertainty I think surrounding it than the early TCG because a lot of the time in the TCG you can sort of fall back on OCG rulings, whereas the OCG is sort of the Wild West. But
Yeah,
I do
it's
want to
fun though if you like playing that kind of thing.
sure, it's something that
Especially volume 2.
it's something that
Volume 2 is the most explosive bit, though it's not really that explosive. It's very slow.
yeah. I mean, it's something that I sort of always say where like there's every format has someone who will enjoy it, in my opinion. Like, going for a lot of damage here. Uh, oh, it's a cyber jar too. That's pretty wild. So not done for a bit of a decision to make. But yeah, I mean, it's something I always say where like there's a format, every format has people who will enjoy it. And so even if I don't necessarily enjoy a format myself, I do want to feature it. I want to mention it in the TCG because like there are people out there who it will be their jam and I want to sort of expose them to it. But for the other comments that have sort
Lawyers.
of appeared in while we've been talking about this,
Uh,
just Punch says, I think Injection Fairy Lily was the card that kind of replaced Cannon Soldier, or maybe vice versa when people saw Cannon Soldier as that era's Lily and wanted to play the closest thing. Honestly, I think that that's actually, very, very accurate because basically they're both cards that you search out or that you can search out, just end the game on the spot. And of course, there are like subtle differences to them. For instance, Cannon Soldier can pair better with like Change of Heart or something. But the amount of damage you're doing off Lily can often just win the game if you've got a Change of Heart, anyways. So I do think that like once Lily gets introduced, that is really where you see Cannon Soldier start to like fall off and no one really plays it anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a very, very
And
good point for that. CS
yeah,
also says
and
Yu-Gi Kaiba
fiberful.
is the Bronze Age of Yu-Gi-Oh, while Volume 1 is the Paleolithic Age. And they say that one of those is the Stone Age, but I'm not sure exactly which one of them they're supposed to be. But
It
yeah,
would
that
be the
painful
Paleolithic
closed out the
age.
game there.
It's
49.53. Yep, that
1999
will do it.
is most certainly prehistory for us because no internet in Japan as we thousand where they really established the internet in that country. And we find they can finally find actual sources.
Yeah, honestly, with the internet, like it's wild to think of how new the internet is relatively. Like, even in America, like it wasn't
Yeah.
really a thing that many people were using until like the early 2000s.
Yeah,
And
though
so
by that point in like 1999, 2000, there was a network.
I
It was
know that's why I said it's
established.
not why
Yeah.
it's something that not many people were using. Um,
Yeah, in
but
Japan, they were behind, like really behind. The government had to implement it themselves.
yeah, I mean, to be fair, a lot of countries were not like the internet was started in America. So, a lot of countries then got it later than America did because it was started here, so we naturally had more access to it early on. Um, Justice Punch
Yeah.
says, based on the history of OCG videos I've seen so far, it seems like early OCG was basically a gigantic slot machine within a slot machine. And honestly, I think that is very true to some extent from what I've seen as well. It reminds me a lot of
Mm.
when I featured like LOB format. Like LOB format is another sort of like slot machiney format where like it's basically like you got people playing like the beatdown Yu-Gi-Oh, but also you've got Exodia on top of that, and like it leads to a very interesting dynamic, but at the same time, it's very, very luck dependent. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, I
LOB
think,
format is like an evolved version of that early period.
yeah,
But the
and
new X, we got what they call the new expert rules. It's third rule set of the game
yep,
if you actually look at it that way.
and
When we got LOB, it's a combination of like two series one packs like Phantom God and their Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon. And we got Exodia when they didn't at that point.
yep,
Exodia
Exodia was a very
distributed
different.
differently.
Yeah, it was very. I mean, that's why you had the Tokyo Dome riots as well, because of Exodia, and
And
so
ironically, the Tokyo Dome riots is why Exodia became a tier zero threat later in the year in the first place.
well, I mean, it became a tier 0 threat because it was so crazy. Hey, Todd Bobbitt, hello to
Distribution.
you as well. Um,
Oh,
but
hello.
yeah, I mean, I do think I want to say one thing about like those videos as well is that like I think that when you have formats that are like as wild as the early OCG ones, I think that really plays to SEMO and MBT's strengths where they are sort of just like riffing back and forth with each other, and I think that they're very entertaining when they do that, and like when the gameplay is that simplified, it can sort of lead to the riffing being a bigger part of the video, and I think we've seen that in the current videos that are out for History of the OCG. So very, very cool to see. Um, yeah, Exodia is behind you, YGO from Zero, lol. Yeah, I mean, we will get back to Exodia in future formats when it does potentially come up again, in very different forms. But yeah, we've covered the probably the strongest Exodia decks that you'll
Ironically,
find in the TCG so far. But very, very cool to see
yeah,
that.
man.
Like,
Except Silly Snake. Three charities insane.
I mean, Silly Snake, you've got hand rips as well, so.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's not that
I
bad though
know. I
because
mean,
of
listen, I
backup
tested the
soldier.
deck in Silly Snake. I was not too impressed with it. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun thing that you can play and you can occasionally win. But I think in Critter, honestly, Exodia is a little bit more
It's
consistent.
at its
But
peak there though. Silly Snake's not an official format anyway. It's a what if
yeah, yeah.
format.
Um,
It's just saying Silly Snake is just much stronger than Critter. Totally, but Critter has a better place.
yeah, that's why I say
You
that
could
Critter
argue.
is Exodia is better in Critter than Silly Snake. But CS says I heard that they had to use actual lawyers for rulings that early in the game. That's very, very funny.
Yeah, it's
Imagine
funny.
like going to law school and the case that comes down is like, okay, what happens when Fisher's activated on a set monster? Uh, so
Yeah,
that
those questions had to be answered.
yeah,
Though further, What they're doing is playing maximized cards, though. Why in the hell are you playing multiple two-pronged attack? That's dumb. Even at that point, just play one.
I mean,
But
d-
otherwise,
deck building
what
at
was I
that
going to
point is
say?
like, I don't know where they're sourcing their deck building from, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if they just made them
Oh,
themselves. Like
they did make them themselves.
it reminds me of back in the early TCG history videos, where we had things like the MBT's Exodia deck for LOB format, which in hindsight,
Terrible.
after we've gone back and explored a bit more, like Exodia is a lot better than it made it out to be because you have to play multiple pieces, but it's very unintuitive. So I understand why they missed that. Todd Bobbitt asks, okay, it looks like the question is gone. But I saw they were asking what did I think about something, but I guess maybe they got their answer. But CS says, I heard that's the reason why Takahashi wouldn't include cash prizes in the game. That makes sense. Takahashi was a very good guy, and I think that he didn't want the player base to sort of come to harm there. So I think it makes sense
It's a
why they did that.
very
Although,
fascinating story
yeah.
that I got my hands on one of the earliest interviews with Takahashi
Oh,
in
very
the
cool.
OCG period, 1999, in the valuable book one. I've even transcribed it and translated it.
That's pretty
Very
dope.
interesting.
That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
like a little
Uh,
context. Late
oh,
90s,
yeah.
there was a,
I just want to
and I'm
answer
trying to
another
explain
comment
it.
that was
Yeah.
here. Oh, and we get to see the acid trap hole knock interaction there come up again. But honestly, Aratos
Boom.
losing the bazoo is not that big of a deal. Top Bobbit asks, what do you think of these Sacred Beast cards? Why do you go from zero? I think they're really cool. I grew up at a time when it was very nostalgic for that sort of thing because GX was airing. Okay, yeah, that's the end of the game with the change of heart there. Yeah, so
Won the
that
match.
wraps things up. But yeah, very very
Let's
good match it
jump.
seems like here. So the
Let's
finals
jump
are
quickly.
actually Aratos versus Dump Truck for the championship title there. To sort of claim the title of whoever is the person with the
It's
most
the
wins
replay. That
and
sucks.
in the locals. So, but yeah,
But yeah,
I'm very nostalgic for the Sacred Beast cards, and I think it's cool to see the modern legacy support for them. Talabot says, who would win the Sacred Beasts or the God cards? I think with their original lines of support, I would actually say the Sacred Beasts because I feel like the Sacred Beasts are easier to sort of like bring out than the God
yeah.
cards in a lot of situations. But if we're talking about like all
Honestly,
the support that they've gotten since then, I could maybe see it going to the God cards, honestly. But it's still a very, very cool match.
honestly, honestly, the God cards would probably win more, or more. It's better to say that Obelisk would win.
Well, again, in which
Yeah,
context? In the
Obelisk is
modern
just the
support or the
strongest
old
of
or
the
the
six.
original support?
Back in the early on, not only because Obelisk came out later, Obelisk at that point was just stupid strong for what it
I
could do.
I don't know. I feel like it's harder to search out or to get three monsters on the board than to get just three continuous traps or spells or what have you on the board. Like I feel like Uriah Turbo would beat like an Obelisk deck in the early days.
Maybe
Um,
it
but
depends, really. Like if it's either Uriah or Obelisk, if we're being honest,
yeah,
they're the
and
best ones.
I feel like Uriah is the more consistent card to bring out, and that to me would make Uriah win. But Red Eye Solari says it was fun to play Hat Control again. At least let's see who will break the tie. Yeah, Hat Control is a super cool deck. I'm glad to see that you're still experimenting with it. Because it is really cool. I think it's a dope card. And not enough people are playing with magical hats because it's just a weird card that not many people think about. But it's really cool to see that you've developed this strategy with it.
Yeah.
CS says, I wonder how they conceptualize the effects for the monster from Duels to the Roses, Injection Fairy Lily, Wanghu, Slate Warrior, Rigorous Reaver, Time Eater, etc. Yeah, I actually don't know. It's really cool in the early Yu-Gi-Oh games how the effects and stuff are just completely different from how the actual game plays. I think it's probably why there is such like devoted communities to those old games. Like with Duels for the Roses, you see people doing runs of it. And with Forbidden Memories as well. People do runs with that as well, and it's just cool to see this sort of community that have built up around that. Top Hobbit says, how about the Ultimate God card versus Ultimate Sacred Beast card? I think Ultimate God card wins. Because if we're talking about bringing it out, like, it's much easier to bring out the Ultimate Sacred Beast card, which is like Armatile. But the Ultimate God card, if it hits the field, just wins the game. So, but both of them are incredibly hard to bring out. So, like, honestly, if you've got decks devoted to bring them out, it might just be like whichever one gets lucky and is able to bring it out. So, Just Punch says Obelisk actually has topping lists, but I don't think any of the Sacred Beasts ever topped a tournament. Yeah, but I think Obelisk had topping lists like much later in the game's history. Not like when, I mean, you could argue like when they were initially released, like when that actually means, because Obelisk itself came out like much later in the game's history than the DM era, like in terms of official play.
Yes.
Which then had more tools to actually bring it out. But I think if we're talking about like if it released in the DM era, well, I mean, we're getting into a lot of hypotheticals here, but
He hasn't CS. I don't think he reads it.
have I seen the new leaks for the OCG Stories manga? I have read a little bit of OCG Stories. Or OCG Structures, right? Which
Yeah.
I thought it was fun for what I read of it. But I haven't seen the new leaks. I'm really far behind on it, so I did enjoy it though.
It's the Sky Striker series is over. It's a new series now.
Oh, neat. So that's pretty cool. It's also nice that like the mangas at least are continuing to focus on like the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game, or the Yu-Gi-Oh like OCG, right? Because it's in Japan.
Yeah.
But like what I mean is opposed to like Rush Duels, because the animes are all focusing on Rush Duels now. And that's fine. Like they're fun. Like Rush Duels are fun to watch. They're fun to play. They're just a different sort of game. So I think it's cool to still see stories about the card game that we're seeing here, or that we're actually playing. But it would be cool if Rush Duels got more support in the West, I will say.
There's also
yep.
There's also a manga about like the OCG itself. They're playing the decks that come out.
Yeah, wasn't that OCG Structures?
I think that is it. Is
Yeah,
that the other one?
I thought you were
there are
talking
two of
about.
them.
I thought you were talking about that.
There are
one.
two of them now.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the more the merrier, honestly. Todd Bobbitt says, I hear Obelisk was dumb. I say that because saw what he did in the Yu-Gi-Oh movie, the first one. Obelisk is like, if you're talking about like the effect is like very, very powerful. The effect is like somewhat powerful, but I do think there's enough cost associated with it to like make it fine, right? Like you need to have 3 monsters on field to actually bring it out, like distribute it out. And like there are ways around it. I think like it's a good enough boss monster. I think like there are other boss monsters that I think are more powerful than Obelisk, but yeah, this is a very intense game, by the way. We've sort of been glossing over the game.
Yes.
No, he
very
attacked
crazy.
the Pyramid of Light.
Yeah.
Well, the Pyramid of Light had like different. Like I'm pretty sure the movie had different effects for like Pyramid of Light and stuff like that. CS says, are the cards from exclusive pack legal in traditional chaos? Now, depending on what you mean by traditional chaos, which is part of why I don't like the term traditional chaos, because I feel like it makes things too confusing. It's kind of like when you got hat versus high hat, right? And it's like, which one's which? So if we're talking about the version of chaos that I've covered on my channel so far, the exclusive pack cards are not legal in that. But they will be legal later on in formats that I cover. Like they're coming up soon, but it's not in the current chaos format that I'm covering.
Yeah, like,
but we'll get into all that.
Depends on when he wants to set it up.
Format.
Like it depends on when he wants to set the date. Like
yeah,
this,
and I'm still
go
deciding,
from July to October.
Like I'm still deciding on exactly where to set things, because like in the past it's been a lot easier because like the new packs have come out and like made a major change. Like each new pack has introduced like major changes to the game. The packs that are about to come out, like Ancient Sanctuary still releases some, major changes, or at least big enough changes to matter. The sets after that don't really do as much. But I will say like, it's still going strong. I don't know what. I don't know. My Wi-Fi looks fine on my end, so I don't know why we keep
Yeah.
disconnecting. But anyways, sorry about that interruption again. But
Yep.
yeah,
It
so
depends really.
well, no,
Like
I'm
we
explaining my
have,
methodology for it. So,
yeah,
basically, I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go basically by like ban list as opposed to pack release because I feel like the ban lists are like more impactful than the pack releases. Um, but I can still like have like I may do like a video or two talking about like when the packs released, for instance. Kind of like what I do for my unlimited format videos. Um, but yeah, CS asked me, what is your favorite ultimate rare considering warrior format is coming soon? I really like Horus level 8. I think that card looks sick in ultimate rare. And also I just really like the Horus cards in general. Um, so for me personally, that's mine. But I will admit I haven't looked at like the art for all the different ultimate rares. I haven't seen all the ultimate rares in person. Um, so I can't quite say that my take is like unbiased, and whatever take I have on this is probably gonna be biased to some degree. Um, but yeah, that would be my favorite personally. What are all your favorite ultimate rares as well? Let me know in the comments. Because Horrors of Blade is really cool.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's an ultimate rare, not
Thank you.
just an
I was gonna
ultra
say
rare. But yeah,
with that period, like we start to see other releases, promotional cards, so to speak. Like
yeah,
Ancient Sanctuary doesn't become legal until July. So July 2nd would be the first promotional cards, which aren't very good. But then if we skip ahead a bit, like we have the World Championship prize cards, which are illegal, the first illegal ones,
yeah, and that's
because they
part of
win
why
the
I'm not going to be
match.
covering the
Yeah.
when those come out. But
Yeah.
um,
They're not legal anyway, so it
yeah,
doesn't
that's
matter.
why I'm not going to be
But
covering them.
we have
But yeah, Red Ice
the
Survival, that's what I'm
collect.
going to do. I'm going to discuss the new packs with the new ban list when they come out. So basically, like the guides themselves won't quite change. It's just a matter of like defining like where they'll be, sort of, right? Like where the
Yeah.
formats will be.
AST AST fits with the traditional at this point setup of releases. There aren't any new releases at July. The difference is August they released the ban list, which isn't legal at the time, but it's there and people could play with it if they wanted to at the local level. So that'd be our what if format for this
Yeah, but
block.
again, I'm gonna be like sort of mapping that out because I think the next couple formats are a bit like tricky to map in terms of like what I want to cover. Um, and I've been sort of like preparing that a little bit as I've been closing out my coverage of Chaos format. Um, but yeah, I'll be making videos about that sort of stuff like when I get to them, and I'll be making announcements about that sort of thing as well in the Discord when we sort of open up new channels. But yeah, just Punch said, if you had to guess, what formats do you think will be? What formats do I think will be in over the summer? Uh, for the summer, let's see, what month is it? It's February now, so I
Yeah.
think
You're still in chaos,
yeah,
going to IOC, maybe starting AST if you have the
yeah, we're gonna
time.
be
But
starting. We're gonna
March,
be getting into the AST stuff pretty soon. Like
yeah,
definitely by the end of the month. We're
yeah,
going to
March will be AST and the ban list
well,
for that when you cover that.
yeah.
That's
I'm not gonna talk
changes
about
quite a
like
bit.
I'm not gonna get into like which tournament. Well, okay. I think what you're asking is like what tournaments as well. I don't have like the monthly map for the tournaments
Yeah,
because I don't know which tournaments I want to focus on. Because like some formats I think do deserve tournaments, others do not, in my opinion. Um, because again, it's like I think the formats with ban lists definitely deserve their own tournaments. But even then, like it depends on the amount of changes to the format with the ban lists, and that's part of why I'm like trying to map it a bit. But I think
yeah.
like by the summer we'll be in like early GX, so I wouldn't be surprised if we're at like you know like I think we'll reach
Goat
Reaper
Reaper.
format at some time in the summer.
Yeah,
Uh,
goat format, the
yeah,
goat
goat
summer.
format will
That'll
be
be fun.
goat format will either be like the beginning of summer or like sometime in the spring.
Yeah,
Um,
goat format and cyber format, which is basically the same banless block.
Yeah. Oh, I will
even
say,
if
like,
cyber format
yeah, I will
is
say,
a bit different.
every format that's like listed on format library, I am planning on doing like a monthly tournament for, because those already exist and thus have people playing them. So, you know, those are definitely going to be monthly tournaments as well. Um, but yeah, I think we'll probably be around Reaper format, or like in the Stein formats, at somewhere in the summer. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Of course, things could definitely change one way or another. It depends on my rate of releasing videos and things. Like for instance, January has been a slow month for me because I've been, well, not a slow month for me personally, but a slow month for the channel because I've been busy and stuff. But like, you know, it depends on a lot of things, but I would guess that it's around the Stein formats in the summer. Just Punch says, uh, I'm happy to hear that. I typically only play in formats when there is a specific deck I want to play, and Reaper is the first one where I have a deck in mind that I really want to play. To me, deck building is the most fun part of the game. Yeah, Reaper should be a lot of fun. Reaper will be very nostalgic for me because Reaper is sort of the first format that I got into, like in terms of like online communities. Back when
Oh,
MBT was promoting that, I joined the Reaper Discord server, and that was sort of my first introduction to online Yu-Gi-Oh communities. So, uh,
yeah.
very
And then
nostalgic for me
everyone
there.
decided the format's just Cyberstein and Rescue Cat and abandoned it. How
Yeah, I mean
fun.
it basically is that. As someone who was sort of like on the ground when it was happening, it really just is like a Stein format. Like Stein's just so powerful there. But I do think that Stein formats can be fun if you go into it expecting that. Like if you go into Reaper expecting like something similar to Goat but better, which a lot of people were. Like a lot of people were sort of publicizing Reaper as like it's better Goat, right? It's more interesting Goat. Like some of the power cards from Goat are banned, so like it's more exciting Goat. Like if you go into it with that mindset, then I don't think you're gonna have fun. But if you go into it like appreciating
People's
what Reaper is,
yeah.
then I think that Reaper can be pretty fun. Um,
People skipped Goat CRV or Cyber format
yeah,
and
well,
didn't understand.
yeah. I mean, I think they felt Cyber might have been a bit too similar to Goat, but Reaper is like much more different. I don't know exactly why they latched onto Reaper over like Cyber or something like that, but um, yeah. Also, this is we sort of skipped over all the gameplay here, but very interesting gameplay
Yeah.
going on. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, Dumptrick has still has their Raigeki left, but Dark Hole's gone, so this is a pretty big turn for Ratos, and Dumptrick is in a really bad spot, and it looks like that will be the end of that game. Um,
Yeah. It was a long game.
yeah.
And
Um,
we answered a lot of oh my
yeah,
goodness.
no, and
Red Eyes
comments keep
Darkness
coming.
Dragon or Blue
Uh,
Eyes Shining Dragon? V Socks.
Oh, well, I would go for Blue Eyes Shining Dragon, even if we have no way to summon it, because it does a lot more on board if you can summon it. And also, it looks cool. Like, I went to the movie, I got the pack, I got Blue Eyes Shining Dragon. It's a formative childhood memory for me. So, you know, I also did get the Red Eye Structure deck, too, like, or the Dragon Structure deck. So, I also got Red Eye Darkness Dragon. But, you know, Shining always just seemed cooler to me. But
Thanks for the
to
question,
to get
Todd.
into you know what other people said, Solar says I do wonder how Skill Drain performed in Reaper format. Dead Rat was a deck that was playing a lot of Skill Drain, and you know Dead Rat was a deck that I would probably say people have realized is like tier 2. It's not quite tier 1. It does very well in some events, but like ultimately it just does not stand up to Stein, and that's the big thing that you need to do in that format. But Skill Drain is like pretty good. The issue is that like a lot of people are playing like Cold Wave Monarch and stuff like that. So that kind of, I mean, you can chain skill rain to the cold wave, but then they can sort of play around it. So oftentimes you don't wind up with like, um, with a Cyberstein activation and like chain skill drain. Um, but it isn't a bad card, and like Dead Rat is a really good strategy, like relatively. CS says a lot of people say Cyber Dragon ruined the game forever, and it definitely did. I wouldn't say like it like I get that you know most people view those people as like you know over exaggerating, and I would agree that they're kind of over exaggerating there because I don't think that like it was as drastic a thing as they like make it out to be. But I do think that it did sort of set a precedent for like you know, a special type of card in the game where it's just like a free special summon, much freer than like chaos monsters because those you need to sort of build your deck a certain way. Cyber Dragon, you know, you can just slot into any deck pretty much that wants to get a bit more aggressive. And so, yeah, like I can definitely see why people say that, but I personally think like there are other cards that probably ruin the game a lot more. Um, and as Just Punch says, there are a lot of quit moments in the game's history. I wonder if some of the tournament regulars will call it quits when Cyber Dragon releases, or when Synchro releases, or that's terrible ban list. And the funny thing is that like you say that's terrible ban list, but there are a couple in the game's history that you could be referring to. I would guess you're talking about the ban list that like did not hit. It was like when like Inzektor, Wind Up, and Dino was out, and there was like a ban list that didn't hit any of them. It hit Tango Plant or something. Um, but I mean, even then, like a lot of people do play Dino Rabbit and have fun with it. But yeah, I do find it interesting. I think there probably will be people who are like tournament regulars now who sort of like don't play in the tournaments featuring like later formats. And like ideally, I would like to grow to the point where like we could potentially hold like maybe multiple tournaments a month, maybe like one GX one DM one while we're in GX, for instance. Because that way, the people who enjoy DM can still have those, while also, we have GX for the people who want to see the like the newer formats that we're covering. But I don't think we're like I personally don't have quite the amount of time right now to do that, and I'm not sure we're big enough to like support that sort of thing or make it something that's like super worth doing right now. But we can sort of like play it by ear when we get to there potentially. But that would be an ultimate goal to like just keep highlighting the different eras of the game's history, because I think there's a lot of good stuff out there. But yeah, Red Eye Solar says, honestly, looking back, Cyber Dragon is partly responsible for making Cyberstein the household name in the TCG. Yeah, I mean, Cyber Twin Dragon, like with Cyberstein, is like that's the combo, right? You basically you like tribute off a Monarch, last will out of Cyberstein, pay 5,000 for Cyberstein, you get out Cyber Twin Dragon attacks him 5,600, the Monarch attacks him for 2,400, and that's exactly 8,000. Also, Cyber Dragon can serve as a Monarch tribute fodder, so that's very good there as well. But yeah. CS says, and a lot of the cards were designed to counter popular GOAT cards like Dark World, or make less powerful cards like Avarice after the Lost Millennium. And yeah, honestly, I really I find a lot of early GX card design very interesting. Dark World is just such a heartbreaking deck for me in the beginning, because like it's so cool, but the restriction that it has to be discarded by an effect instead of just discarded is like, it hampers the deck so much. But there's still some cool stuff you can do with it. This is like back to Critter. Attacking Sangan into a Mass Sorcerer. Something that you always have to be frightened of in Critter. Not really coming up as much in Android, but, this turn definitely shows that it can come up. And Dump only on 3 cards engraved, so a level 4 monster can run over that Sangan there. Red Eye Solar asks, is Dark World in Reaper? It is indeed. I remember actually trying to experiment with Dark World in Reaper back when I was playing it, but it's not quite good in Reaper, unfortunately. There's a Reaper Discord server where you can actually see like all the different deck channels that people have made. But yeah, Dark World is just, the Dark World channel is just kind of sad. It's people being like, oh, I've got this cool idea for it, and then testing it out and being like, yeah, this deck is unfortunately bad. But yeah, early GX card design is very interesting. It honestly, most of it isn't the best. Like that's why the cards start to matter less than the ban lists. But there is some interesting stuff going on there, as people, I think they're sort of just trying to figure out how to transition the game into archetypes more. And they really missed a lot of the time in their early sort of attempts at it. But then eventually they sort of got their groove. I'd say honestly, like Strike of Neos is the GX set where like I think things like really shift for me, where like the 6 Samurais, while not really the best archetype, are still like pretty decent. And you also have things like normal ritual stuff that are in there, and you have a lot of cool stuff in Strike of Neos. It's one of my favorite sets in the game's history. And I think after that, I mean, you've got like Gladiator's Assault, you got Light of Destruction, of course, Phantom Dark, like just these completely game warping sets. They're all really strong. But Snatch coming down here on the Elf that will trade with 4 cards from the graveyard off the Skull Lair. Very, very even game in this game here. Yeah. It's always exciting to have a game like this, in my opinion. Just very, very cool. And we see Skull Lair putting in work. This is why people play Skull Lair, why it's such a strong card in this format. And, it is the graveyard management stuff. Like, Dumpstruck now has to constantly be thinking, okay, how can I get those 2 additional cards engraved to set up a 4 banish off the Skull Lair And Erasers has to be thinking around that as well. So very, very cool stuff. Hmm. I'm not actually sure if Reaper includes hidden soldiers. I think it does, but I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me on that. Red Solar says Cyber End Dragon because of Power Bond and Overload are cool. Yeah, Overload Fusion wasn't quite there. That comes out later when Chimera Tech actually releases. But Power Bond is a thing you can do with Cyber End. Oftentimes you don't need to because Cyber Silence is good enough to get you into a winning spot. But you can indeed do that. Ooh, Tomato and then plus a Reborn here. Going in for a lot of damage, getting a draw off the mask, and also getting a third card engraved for your Skull Lair. This is a very, very big swing on Dump Truck's part, and let's see if it pays off for them, because if they've got like a Chainable Trap off that they can put engraved, they do not, unfortunately. So a level 4 monster can be summoned out here, hit over the Mass Sorcerer. But I do think that was a good move on Dump Truck's part, so I like that. But CS says 6 Sam was a budget deck back then, considering Grandmaster was the sneak peek card for Strike of Neos. And yeah, 6 Sam is honestly one of the pieces that sort of puts that deck together. And also you had Shogun Xian, not the synchro that, you know, comes out later, but the like original Shogun, which you could bring out if you have 2 6 Sams, and it's pretty good there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's like I'm looking forward to getting that point in GX. I'm looking forward to honestly a lot of points in the journey that we're sort of going on here, because and Reborn coming down for a Kaiku, getting more damage, banish cards from grave, shut off the Skull Lair, very, very good play. It's sort of going all in, but like both players are sort of all in at this point, and you kind of got to do it. But I mean, this is the sort of game that like you know, you live for if you play Android format, right? Like such a cool game. Does Dump Truck have another monster as well? They've got another Kaiku that will be the end of the game. Very, very cool stuff. Yeah. But this is a great finals. I mean, I think I haven't talked about it that much. I've sort of just let it go on in the background. But I think that this is really, really good. And as Soul says, it really could go either way here, which is honestly really exciting. Now, RHS does get to go first for the last match, which is a slight advantage. I mean, the hand rips are in this format. You can hand rip your opponent on turn 1. Very, very strong play. But, yep, and Duo comes down here. But honestly, like, if you're Dump Truck, you're probably, like, I personally think Duo is the worst of the hand rips. Not to say it's bad, but just because you don't get the hand information. Like, the hand information is so big. And so, honestly, like, if Comfy or Forceful coming down, I think it would be a lot less of a game than if Duo came down. We see a Forceful there, but Racers does have a secret back row card that they, you know, that Dump Truck does not know. Top Up, it says, did anyone watch any of the Yu-Gi-Oh series? And yes, I did. I've watched a lot of them, actually. I've watched, like, I think all of them except for, like, the newest Rush ones. Like, I did do, like, I watched a bit of the first Rush series. But I haven't really seen much of the second one. But yeah, I really like the Yu-Gi-Oh series. I think they're very fun. They're not perfect by any means, but like there's some great series in them. And also like I feel like a lot of people sleep on the later ones. Like my favorite duel in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh anime franchise is in Arc V, and it's the one where it's Sora versus Shun. Sora is from the fusion dimension, which, you know, went in and basically, you know, destroyed the Xyz dimension, and Shun's from the Xyz dimension. It's just like it's a really, really good duel. Highly recommend people checking it out, even if you're like, even if you don't want to watch the rest of Arc V, even if you don't care about Xyz summons or, you know, the later games, the later periods of the game's history. It's a really, really good duel. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff later in the game's history and the show's history as well. Yeah, what are all your favorite animes for the Yu-Gi-Oh series? I feel like everyone's got that like one that you know, people enjoy. Todd Bobbitt says my favorite from Yu-Gi-Oh was Kaiba versus Bakura. Hello, welcome. Were you having just like connectivity issues or?
Oh no, I just didn't have my microphone down. I've been talking into thin air.
Oh, okay.
And I.
No.
Yeah, like I was trying to talk about Six Sams in particular, like how it owes everything to the TCG.
Yeah, but
Grandmaster makes the deck like it's horrible in its original OCG release.
yeah, and it's honestly,
Bad.
not the best in the early days of the TCG either, but it is a lot
It's
better than,
playable.
yeah. And so it's gonna be a
It
fun deck to show
works.
off.
You can top
Uh,
with it. You can top with it.
yeah,
But
yeah, Kaiba
also
versus,
Gateway.
yeah. I mean, once Gateway
Gateway,
comes out, it becomes a very different style of deck, but it's a very
it's also a
interesting style
TCG
of deck.
exclusive.
Yeah,
It owes
uh,
everything.
yeah, but Kaiba versus Bakura was a pretty exciting duel as well. I think my favorite duel from the original Yu-Gi-Oh series, um, is probably. Well, it's a tough question. Probably just the final duel between Yugi and Yami Yugi. I mean, that was such a good duel. Red Solaris asked, "What's your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh anime?" Blah. If you watched them.
Yeah.
Uh,
1 second.
yep.
My favorite was probably like a lot of people's favorites in the time, 5Ds before everything changed
Yeah. I mean,
up to
CS
the Dark
mentions 5Ds
Signers.
here as well. And yeah, very
It's
very good choice.
probably it's still the best Yu-Gi-Oh anime ever produced.
Yeah.
You could argue some other things like DM from Takahashi, but designed if exactly as an anime, not directly from him. He helped with it, but it wasn't his thing.
Hmm.
He didn't make it up completely, but it's probably the best thing produced other than DM itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably agree. Like first season of 5Ds is so good. Like, and by first season I mean like first like big arc, like the Signers versus Dark Signers arc. After that, like there was, I mean, it's still good. Don't get me wrong, but it's a bit less good than it once was. But I mean, yeah, it's just, it's so good. Oh, I like Yu-Gi-Oh! Rain series, Top Bobbit. I think
Yeah.
that was good. I think that's honestly like pretty slept on. I think a lot of people don't like it, or maybe just are not interested in it because link summoning is a thing, and like a lot of people don't like link summoning. Oh, yep, Can Soldier is the end of the game if there's no like TT or trap hole here, but the prio is being activated on the Can Soldier, and yeah, that will be the end of the game. Yeah, looks like no like trap holes or TTs there for Dump Truck, but very, very intense games here. Very, very well fought by both duelists here. These were super sick games. So, yeah.
Mm.
So, congratulations to Aratos for claiming the ultimate title for the locals legends here. I'm actually debating, like, because there was some discussion of having a role for the person who's won the most of these locals. And I'm actually debating because right now in the Discord we call anyone who's won a local legend, but I think I might change that role name to maybe like locals winner or like locals something, or maybe just cut that role out entirely and just have the just locals legend be the top person for this. But yeah, very very good stuff there. And yeah, the tournament is over now. Everyone's in there, so time to end it. So yeah, very good stuff. And let's see if we can get Dump Truck or Ratos in the call here, and see their thoughts on it because it was very very good stuff. I'm gonna just open up the replay here, so we'll get the replay viewing for everyone out there while we're sort of talking about this, and we'll have both hands open here there. But yeah, it is kind of weird, CS, about the like some of the imports from the OCG, like the fact that we didn't get like dark structure decks there. Um, but
We
ultimately, I can't complain
kinda
too much
did.
about the release. Well,
We
yeah,
kinda did,
yeah, but we,
but we didn't get them as a structure deck. They were just thrown into like was it Force of the Break? Not Force of the Breaker. One of them, like
welcome,
Justice.
yeah, welcome Ratos, and congratulations
Hello,
on
Eritos.
your, claiming victory. You've become the true local legend. So
Yeah.
congratulations. What were your
Here.
thoughts playing this locals tonight?
Cyberjar was the MVP for me. Like in terms of games, not matches, I think it single-handedly won 3 of them.
Oh wow. Yeah, we
Dump Truck has
we
joined
saw
us.
we saw a fair amount of
No,
Cyberjar.
Hillian 93 has.
we saw a fair amount of Cyberjar coming up in these games, and it did seem powerful whenever it went off. It's just like, you know, in my own experience with Cyberjar, it's always seemed like too much of a risk because your opponent can get really good things off it as well, and oftentimes being triggered during their turn. So you sort of lose that initiative. So what are your thoughts on that sort of like random aspect on it? Did you sort of just try and mitigate it with things like
Counterpoint,
Mirror Force or
counterpoint.
Oh,
Ca- I will say one counterpoint is that there is absolutely no other format where you can chaz it up. So there is that.
Yeah, chazzing it up is pretty good. Unfortunately,
Like
Cyberjar doesn't let you chazz it up. But Riz, what are your
the,
thoughts
the
on?
only problem,
Mhm.
they can ask you to leave. They can ask you to leave the venue, but you will still have jazzed it up no
Yep.
matter what they say.
I mean, the GX dub is definitely a gift to meme culture in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. Jazz is the best character in that series. Changed my mind. But I am curious about Aratos' response about the Cyberjar and the potential random aspect of it.
Yeah, Cyberjar. I mean, there are definitely times where you'll just get screwed by it. You'll give your opponent the 5 best cards in the game and you get nothing. But I think it's mostly about like when you use the Cyberjar, because like if you're really far behind, then it's a great way to get back into the game. Like this format will just like get you back in there, like Cyberjar.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean we saw that come up a
Um,
couple different times here. So very I hope that people continue to
I mean,
experiment
I've
with
seen
Cyberjar.
in multiple. Oh, sorry.
Oh
Go
yeah,
ahead.
you got
Cyberjar, like as someone who just plays like a few formats, like I play Android, I play Chaos, I play like whatever format's coming up. Like when someone says, "Yeah, we're doing a tournament," I research the format and I learn about it. And like in several formats, I've seen people play Cyberjar, and I'm like, "Thanks for giving me the best hand I could have had."
it.
I had like two cards in hand. Now I have a hand that's gonna change the game, and yeah, two turns later, it's my game, and like I end up winning
Oh
because they
yeah.
played Cyberjar.
I mean, like
Me,
if
the
you're
casual player, it's like me, the casual player who just learned this format like a week ago, is now winning because you played Cyberjar. Good job.
yeah, if you're in the leading position in the game, you definitely don't want to be setting a jar.
Yeah, but
It's like, okay, cool. You
I
played a card that put me ahead.
I
But
can
that's my
definitely
perspective.
well, so I can definitely see like I think if you're behind is really good as Aratos is saying. But also I can see it like I think there are definitely some cards that like when played, poorly, and just sort of your opponent just sets a cyber because it's in their hand, for instance, and they're not really thinking about like the general game state, can definitely like backfire a lot. But it's like because a card needs like a lot of skill to use correctly, it can often be difficult to evaluate in just sort of, for instance, like a locals tournament or in just, one off games or two off games. Because like I think like you really need like seeing how it works in like a tournament as a whole, like a bigger tournament, like a monthly tournament, like the one we have coming up, to actually make like a full conclusion on it because it can sort of go either ways. But again, as Reito said, like if you use it well, it can also get you back in the game, potentially win you the game that you'd otherwise be losing. But as Hylian's saying, like it can also lose you a game that you're winning, so you got to be careful with it. But still a very interesting card, and I'm glad to see more people experimenting with it for sure. But Dump Truck.
I will
Oh, yep. One last thing about
I
Cyberjar.
will say, you know that meme where it's Peter Griffin drowning and he just confesses something,
That's your opinion
and
on
like
Cyberjar?
they give all these really good points, and he's like, I don't care for it.
Yeah,
That's me drowning, being like, I will never put Cyber Dragon in my deck.
yeah, and some people,
Sorry, Cyberjar. Sorry,
yeah, and
Cyberjar. It's like people will give me like an essay long response. I do not care for Cyberjar.
yeah, and different strokes for different folks, right? And not everyone will have to play this sort of thing. Like, for instance, me personally, I probably also won't play Cyberjar. I've just been burned by it too much in the past, which again is probably due to, some of my skill level as a duelist in this format. Like, I'm not the best Android duelist in the world. But, it is one of those cards where it's just too random for me. So I'm probably not going to play it. But I definitely think it can be powerful in the right hands. I mean, as we saw here with Aratos' victory here. But Dump Truck is now on the call as well. And Dump Truck, congratulations on making it to the finals here. What are your thoughts on the locals tonight? And anything that you want to point out to anyone out there, for just anyone wanting to get into Android or just anyone trying to fine tune their deck even more?
I'm not that great an Android player. Tonight was as much a learning experience for me as anything else. Aratos is the man. That's all I really have to say.
Yeah, Ratos, the true local legend. I might change the. I was mentioning this earlier. I might change the title to like local legend being the person who's won the most locals, and then have just a different title for someone who's won a local or a local or two.
You just
But-
say White Palpatine wins game.
No Force Lightning here. Well, I guess Regeki could be Force Lightning. But
Raigeki is Force Lightning. That was actually Takahashi's that was his intention. Trust me.
I'd believe it. But
Oh,
yeah, I
is
hope
that-
that everyone out there sort of like these games and have sort of like seen how fun Android can be. We'll be having another locals in Android next week as well. So I highly encourage everyone to join that. I'll probably do it at a different time because I want to make sure as many people as possible can play in at least one of the locals. So I'll try and mix it up. But yeah, and then the big local, or not the local, the big monthly tournament in Android is starting on this upcoming, or no, not this upcoming Sunday, the next upcoming Sunday, February 11th, I believe. Yeah, February 11th. That's when the big monthly
And that's
tournament will
the
start.
Android tournament, right?
What? Yeah, that'll be the big Android multi-day tournament, and
the
it's
second one.
yeah, it'll be the second one that we've held here, and it should be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping we can get as many people as we got for the Chaos format tournament that we just held. And I
It'll be
my
my second tournament here, and I've greatly enjoyed the first tournament. And I got completely bodied, but in the words of that one extra from Avatar: The Last Airbender, "Hi guys, I'm new here."
Yeah, and I mean,
And then that was the last line I ever got.
and I think as long as you have fun,
Surpassed
that's what
me.
matters. And so I think it's good that you're still going to join this one. And I encourage everyone out there, like, don't fear failure. Failure is not a terrible thing. Failure is a way that you can improve as well. And as long as you're having fun, it doesn't matter if you're winning or losing. It's just about having fun, in my opinion. So.
Plus, there's no prize to there's no entry fee. So
no
like if
entry
you
fee.
lose in the first round, like dude, no one's calculating this. Like you lost, come back next tournament. We have one every month.
Yep, exactly.
We
there.
record the replays, so we kinda are.
Well,
just
no, but the
not.
replays. I mean,
You know
the
what I
replay
mean.
should not be a thing where it's like, like, oh, look at how
We're not
bad this
mocking
person
you or
is. It should
anything.
be a good thing.
No,
to
it's just
see.
more like we
Yeah.
kind of are posting your performances, just
Yeah, but it
not
shouldn't
for
be
the
viewed
sake
as
of.
that way. I think it's
Yeah.
just good to have the
I-
replays there as learning experiences for everyone involved, and yeah, I think it's everyone should just go into the format with an open mind and join the tournament if it sounds interesting. But yeah, so I think that's the biggest message that I want to sort of get to people out there, and that's going to do it for tonight's stream. Thank you for everyone for stopping by to this locals and everyone who played in the locals as well. Thank you as well.
Glad I could drop in. Sorry if I interrupted.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to hop in as well. And anyone out there who's interested in this sort of thing, we hold locals tournaments every week. So if you want to join the next one, head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description of this video. And also, it's just a great place to find games in any of the formats that I've featured on the channel so far. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.
See you on the couch.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, good stream.